I'd like to go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the St. Lucie County Planning and Zoning Commission, Thursday, April 21st. If everyone will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, do you want to do the prayer? Got to ask.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. Lord, we just ask that you watch over us tonight, Lord. Give us the heart to make the best decisions for our community, Lord. We just pray for everything going on in the world that you'll have your hand on that. And we ask all this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bridgers?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Slack?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Binner?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Slate?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lowndes?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Munt? Mr. Odell? Vice Chair Lowe?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Taylor?
Yes, ma'am. We do have excused absences from Commissioner Munt and Commissioner Odell. Okay. Announcements, just a couple things on the agenda. We've got the urban service boundary, item 9B. I'm going to move that to the end, so we'll go ahead and get through A, C, and D first, because those should be a little bit quicker. I'll move urban service boundary to the end. Okay, do we need a motion on the minutes that we're deferring them? Or do we just announce that we're deferring them?
An announcement is fine.
Okay. So we're deferring the minutes from March 17th, so we don't have to do anything on that. All right, we've got public comment. If there's any members of the public wishing to address the board on any non-agenda items, please come forward. All right, seeing none, I will close the public comment. And we'll go ahead and move into public hearings, item 9A. Madam Secretary, if you could please read the item.
Item 9A, Agricultural Air Services, text amendment to the Land Development Code to amend section 3.01.03C.7 and create section 7.10.36 to include RV and boat storage facilities as an eligible conditional use in the Ag 5, Agricultural 5 zoning district with location and design criteria.
Okay. Mr. Benton, take it away.
Good evening, Chairman Taylor, members of the Commission, members of the public joining us this evening. The subject petition was filed by Agricultural Air Services with Representative Daniel Sarra of Cutler and Herring representing them. The proposed text amendment seeks to include RV and boat storage facilities as an eligible conditional use within the Agricultural 5 zoning district, as well as propose supplemental standards that would require adherence for these proposed facilities, incorporate design elements, and establish eligibility criteria limiting the proposals to select areas within the AG5 district. This evening's public hearing was noticed in the local newspaper, detailing the scope of the request. And to launch a little bit of background of the AG5 zoning district, which is the largest zoning district in St. Lucie County by land area. The district's purpose is to provide and protect an environment suitable for productive commercial agriculture, together with such uses as may be necessary and compatible with productive agricultural surroundings. This zoning district offers a wide variety of opportunities, established citrus crops, farms, ranches, as well as residential development, and then support services, supporting crop production, agricultural support services, different transportation aspects, but also flight activities related to agricultural production, but also neighborhoods that have had opportunity to integrate type of aircraft and other farm-related activities. This exhibit represents the overall Agricultural 5 zoning district. As you can tell from this exhibit, it's predominantly situated west of I-95, most of which is south of the Flores Turnpike, extending west to our county line at Okeechobee, north to Indian River County, and then south again to Martin County. Most of the enclaves that you see west within the mass of AG5 are predominantly conservation public lands that have been acquired by the state, by St. Lucie County, or even South Florida Water Management District, and have been rezoned for that particular conservation public. But the majority of the area deemed out west is within the AG5 zoning district. We'll highlight some of the blue regions and red boxes here in just a few moments as it relates to the overall proposal. But building on some of the eligible uses within the Ag 5 district, permitted, again, agricultural production, services, research facilities. We'll point to Save the Chimps out of Header Canal Road, kennels, and riding stables. So a lot of animal capacity out west, and of course single-family dwelling units, ensuring that new lots do not have less than 5 acres per unit. And we have ranchettes that are on 5 units per acre, or sorry, 1 unit per 5 acres. We also have single-family homes that are on 1,200 acres. A variety of conditional uses are also eligible in the AG5 district, including aircraft storage and equipment maintenance. We've seen some local neighborhoods pursue conditional use to have accessory airports, flying, landing, takeoff fields, such as Arrow Acres and the Treasure Coast Air Park. And then also a conditional use allowance in the AG5 district for gasoline and fueling stations, camp, sporting, recreational, off-road vehicle parks, and outdoor shooting and gun ranges, subject to particular standards. The applicant's request is to introduce recreational vehicle and boat storage facilities subject to supplemental standards that we'll detail here in just a few moments. The use in general for recreational vehicle and boat storage facilities are low traffic generators, typically low intensity. The hours of operation and security are largely the key components in evaluating those types of facilities, as well as the overall design, where they're located, the type of access road because of the handling of larger vehicles, trailers, and navigating to and from the site, but also considering proximity to the owners and the customers that these facilities serve. To grapple with and address those types of standards and criteria, staff, in collaborating with the applicant, presented the following. The eligibility for the AG5 zoning district would be limited to those parcels of land located within 1.5 miles of State Road 68 and State Road 70, known as Orange Avenue and Okeechobee Road, subject to the following standards that are drafted for presentation to the Planning and Zoning Commission. First, under subsection A, requiring that these facilities are accessible via a roadway paved to county standards and is subject to site plan review. Additionally, that these activity areas shall be screened from all public rights-of-way and adjoining properties with a minimum 30-foot landscape buffer and a berm along the public right-of-way, and then having additional standards where these facilities may be adjoining property utilized for residential use, increasing the typical buffer from 10 feet to 15 feet and requiring an opaque buffer between the facility and that adjacent site. Requirement that all vehicular use areas shall be paved, comparable to our land development code as established. Ensuring that the site plan identifies all proposed utilities, stormwater areas, light fixtures, refuse collection areas, and other improvements to support the service. And then a qualitative and quantitative requirement for site lighting to ensure that if lighting is proposed for security and for enhanced access in the evening hours, that there are provisions to avoid adverse impacts of adjacent areas. Applicability of our county's restricted access design standards, but then also an acknowledgement that through the conditional use process, as an individual petition is filed, in addition to the, restating that there's the ability for staff, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and offering recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners can consider reasonable limitations, operational components to ensure or enhance compatibility with surrounding areas. The maps presented on screen demonstrate the potential eligibility based upon the presented criteria. First, being situated in the AG5 zoning district, also being located within 1.5 miles of Orange Avenue and Okeechobee Road, with a zoom-in area providing the general parcels that would be eligible. Now, the criteria then also adds the ability to provide paved access via roadway to county standards, amongst other considerations, which could limit some of the viability of the properties presented, some of which currently do not have frontage on a public roadway or do not have paved access. Those would all be components for an applicant to consider when proposing this type of use or conditional use petition. An evaluation of the proposed text amendment and the provided feedback from staff and our encompassed analysis, staff finds the proposal to be consistent with the standards of review set forth in Land Development Code section 11.06.03 and in compliance with the county's comprehensive plan, goals, policies, and objectives. Therefore, staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward this petition to the Board of County Commissioners with a recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. Are there any questions of staff from the board at this time? Mr.
Yes.
Lowndes?
Mr. Benton, you go back to your reference of the pavement. Is that within the facility itself has to be paved?
Chair Taylor, Commissioner Lowndes, there's two components of paved material in this text amendment. First, it would require that for a site to be eligible, that it either have access to a roadway paved to county standards, or the proposal includes the ability or the design to pave the connection. For instance, if we were talking about a section of South Header Canal, that might be chip sealed millings, but not paved to county standards. If the site is proposed for this use via conditional use and site plan, the design should include improvements to that roadway to the nearest paved roadway.
But it
Presumably
doesn't specify the type of pavement within the facility itself.
That's part two. It does include that. So all vehicular use areas shall be paved in accordance with Land Development Code section 2.0000. That's specifically for motorized vehicles. So for instance, if we were looking at a 5-acre site, the access drive aisle, the areas that a truck pulling a boat or pulling a camper or the actual motorized RV would traverse to get to and from storage sites or storage bays would be paved and improved to county standards. However, the storage sites or bays where a boat or a tow-behind camper could be parked could be an alternative surface, not paved. But any motorized vehicle being stored, including that of a RV, that would have to be on a paved surface based upon these standards presented.
Would pressed chip seal surpass for that?
It would not for the drive aisles or vehicular use areas, but it could be a viable option for some of the storage sites for non-motorized vehicles.
And the purpose of that?
The purpose is generally for maintained durability and storm water design and capture to ensure that as storm water is processed on site, there's pre-treatment and then design for inevitable outfall or discharge.
Of using the roadways for drainage?
It depends upon the location and South Florida Water Management District standards, county standards, but also if it's within the North St. Lucie River Water Control District area, they would have design standards of what type of pre-treatment, what type of on-site storage, and then the inevitable discharge.
But the roads within that development would have to be paved, with the exception of where you're gonna back a boat or back a trailer or such have you.
That's
That
correct.
could be chip sealed or pressed.
The drive
Rock.
aisles would need to be paved surface.
Thank you.
Mr. Slack?
Why the 1.5-mile distance?
The consideration for the Commissioner Slack, the consideration for the 1.5-mile distance is not only the overall perspective of access to these types of public facilities or infrastructure, paved roadways, but largely the accessibility for potential customers to ensure that they're not meandering throughout western St. Lucie County with no street lights, with no particular directional signs in those remote areas. We were looking at sites that were readily accessible from main thoroughfares, arterial roads, that would not be too far off the beaten path.
And you consider a
public
mile and a
safety.
half to be not too far off the beaten path? Okay. And how do we enforce the lighting standards?
The lighting standards would be enforced through the site plan review process if lighting is proposed by the project. We're looking for specifications of the light fixture, the overall height, the type of lumens, and the design. Is it downward facing? Is it broad to avoid floodlights? The angle of those, and in some cases, if lighting is proposed, we would request a photometrics plan as part of the site plan and conditional use review process. But if low-level lighted bollards, things that are not going to cause spillover to adjacent properties, we may not request a full photometrics plan.
Yeah, I can see the disadvantage of using the bollards when you're pulling trailers and backing them into spaces that may not be tall enough for the drivers to see the fixtures. But reaching so far into the rural and undeveloped parts of the county to get to a mile and a half off a major roadway, and then putting a site together that's lit at night using masted lighting could cause light pollution and light intrusion. Not necessarily so. I understand we can pretty well control the spillover into the adjacent properties using the photometric plan. But I'd really like to see the fixtures shielded and as low as possible without being a hazard to be run over, just to avoid losing our dark night sky, so that for people who choose to live in rural areas and enjoy seeing the night sky, they don't lose that opportunity because we've allowed so much development, so much light-producing development, to light up the night sky inadvertently through reflection off of these new paved surfaces. So you've got a light-colored paved surface and lights, and the higher they are, the more light is going to bounce. I'd like to see that minimized as much as possible. And so perhaps we don't reach quite as far into the rural community with this swath of area where we're allowing this particular use, rather than reaching so far out into undeveloped property. We keep it closer to Orange Avenue and Okeechobee Road.
Commissioner Slack, of course, lighting standards are in that consideration out west was on the forefront of staff's mind when we took a look at this, and on a case-by-case basis and a design, individual designs, we would take a look at those potential impacts, and it would be part of the review and evaluation by this commission as well as the Board of County Commissioners. The 1.5-mile distance too, if you look at the expanse from east to west along those two state roadways, there are quite a few dynamics, but also very distinguishable variables if you're looking at the eastern end versus the western end. But this was a way to have a consistent design of the eligibility. If we're looking at the eastern region where State Road 70 intersects Midway Road, we're starting to see a lot more urban-like development, connection to additional arterial roadways, very similar on Orange Avenue, adjacent to FFA, Pecos, Campbell Road, where there's much more smaller parcel development. So through the conditional use process and the balance of the market, considering where customers may be and the viability of sustaining potentially a costly design proposal, there's certainly a balance of public regulation and establishing a framework for eligibility, a process to evaluate and consider adverse impacts to surrounding areas on a site-by-site basis, but also, understanding that the market may or should guide access and the needs of these types of facilities.
Well, much like our urban services boundary discussion, I'm not sure that this is a really appropriate use that far west. When we concentrate our development and our more light-intensive uses closer to our urban area, it makes a lot more sense, and it allows the rural and undeveloped areas of the county to remain more pristine, and give people the relief from the urban condition that they're seeking. I'm not sure there are that many people that need to store boats that far west in the county anyway.
Hey, Commissioner Slack, to build on that discussion, that this body could recommend type of western boundary, whether that western line for this text amendment may be Header Canal or a north-south roadway further west that would have a logical delineation point.
Could you point out where Header Canal Road would be, please?
Let's take should be here.
Nope, for the west. Right over here.
I'm looking for newly platted property that I'm aware of on Header Canal. I apologize. It's probably this north-south connection then.
Correct.
And the prior roadway that you were outlining? Which one is that?
This is the county line.
No, the one that you were reaching into.
That would most likely be Brocksmith then.
613 is Shen Road, isn't it?
Yes.
Pull up a GIS map to delineate that. But
609 is Shin Road.
I think Shin is just befefore Midway meets State Road 70.
It's over about where a D in road is.
I'll pull up GIS map. For your patience. Header Canal north of Okeechobee Road is a paved roadway. South, it's chip sealed and milled. Good tutorial for the general public on how to access our terrific mapping resources online at your fingertips. So this is Header Canal here. Save the chimps. We'll overlay our streets. McCarty, Shin, Header Canal. Have the fairgrounds here, and then Sneed further to the west.
Okay. Are there any other questions of staff on the board? I had one. If we're done with the map thing, but item C, the boat storage. Is that typical language where it just says it may be required for areas offering boat storage? What's the how do you qualify to have the need for that for impervious surfaces?
Chair Taylor and members of the commission, I think that would again be on a case-by-case basis depending upon if a site is in proximity to any wetlands and environmentally sensitive lands, and other areas that could warrant that type of additional design criteria. again, these types of proposals, including a site plan, stormwater plan, utility plan, we're intending for our collective development review committee to look at the dynamics of stormwater runoff, but that is simply an additional item that has been looked at when we have facilities where boats are stored on an unpaved surface. There's hydraulic fluids leaking, lower unit oils, things like that to consider the predominance of it and whether that additional safeguard should be considered or not. It's not the terminal or the use of term may as opposed to shall gives some flexibility depending upon the overall design scope.
So that would go into the property plan, you know, delineating what they're allowed to be storing there? If it is part of that, you know, the floodplain and all that stuff, we're not gonna allow boats if there's not an impervious surface?
Not necessarily. No, it would allow staff to encourage maybe a 6x4 area where the motors would be stored
Okay.
above some type of capture system. But again, it's very precautious in that line item.
Right. Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lowndes?
Mr. Benton, on the 1.5 mile limit coming off of either Okeechobee Road or Orange Avenue, it really, to me, limits in the future, depending on the development that moves that way. For a facility of this sort, would consider 2 miles or 2.5 miles? I mean, if you get 1.5 miles down Sneed Road, you haven't gone very far, nor have you gone far down Shin Road. And your other opportunities or crossroads out there are limited.
Commissioner Lowndes, in developing this, obviously, you know, considering long-term development, there's always the ability for land use to morph, zonings to be changed to a particular district that allows this as potentially a permitted use. The current presentation of providing a substantial amount of land, and I don't have the particular acreage figure of eligibility on display today. Staff felt it was pretty expansive in creating eligibility in the marketplace, but again, there is nothing that would preclude an individual project in the future on a site that's not identified within this eligibility area. If it's a logical land use pattern or development pattern to propose a rezoning or propose a non-residential use like this, they certainly could. But for the existing conditions and environment within the agricultural 5 zone, which again, the purpose statement that we read earlier, it's primarily centered on commercial productive agricultural lands. We wanted to provide a balance and ensure that it would be accessible to major roadways and the population base it may serve. But again, I don't have a crystal ball to tell what the future may hold and demand for these types of establishments. But certainly there's other routes and mechanisms to propose them outside of these identified areas.
And that 1.5 mile limit is your interpretation of what needs to be done?
That was a counter presented to the applicant in initial discussions.
1.5 miles off Okeechobee Road puts you about where the fire station is.
Certainly encompasses areas south of, on Shin Road, it would be south. I do believe I'll have to measure it out to the,
Coming
that's
south,
Station 11.
coming south off Orange Avenue gets you about where Helena Chemical Company is. And that is very limiting.
I think that the consideration of users, the general public who are driving an RV, pulling a trailer, pulling a boat, we wanted to ensure it didn't traverse or travel past too many residential developments that are found in an agricultural district, and limit some of those trips from the major arterial roadways for this type of traffic. But certainly staff
It could be changed 5 or 6 years from now?
certainly could. There's nothing binding a county-initiated text amendment or another privately initiated text amendment to modify standards.
Change is not easy.
Is that 1.5 miles via the road or as the crow flies?
It's as the crow flies.
Okay. From
Mr. Chair,
physically touching.
a couple comments. It looks like that's about 40,000 acres that you would have permissive to store boats in western St. Lucie County. So it's a fair amount of land. And, you know, it's interesting because right now, a lot of the interim use inside the urban service area is used for boat storage. People use those lots for boat storage, vehicle storage, until they become, you know, more higher market demand. You know, certainly as some of the stuff inside the urban service area gets taken up, it no longer is available for those uses. So we may need more areas. But I agree with your staff that, you know, some of these areas off of State Road 70 and State Road 68, many of them, they don't have guardrails or inadequate recovery room for shoulders. Lighting's poor. You know, further and further you get off, the more catastrophic type event could happen to somebody that's not familiar with those roadways.
But Mr. Chairman, you can't put one of these on a road that's not paved by county standard, is that correct, Mr. Benton?
Based upon the presented text, that would be a requirement.
So we're not gonna go down Angle Road, are we? Or FFA Road?
Well, a portion of FFA is paved, and
You've been down it lately?
yes, sir. South FFA or FFA?
North
North
FFA
side.
Road off
North.
Orange Avenue is not paved by county standard. It's a chip seal road.
Uh,
You ain't gonna put one there.
It would require an applicant to present a design to improve the roadway to access the site in question.
Would you be looking for those safety features like guardrail and all that?
That would, I believe, be part of the DRC's
Yeah.
review in collaboration with Public Works, Road and Bridge Engineering, because it would not introduce this as a by right use, but a conditional use that has the added layer of review to ensure public health, welfare, and safety is met.
Yeah, Mr. Sanders brings up an excellent point. If you blow past your site, you've got to be able to turn that rig around and get back to it safely without
Certainly.
ending up with your boat in the ditch in an unexpected boat trip.
He certainly highlighted important characteristics as presented in the staff report.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If any member of the public wishes to address the board, please come forward on this item. Yep, step right up. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Sam Comer, 8590 Germany Canal Road. And I live out in the western part and have for the better part of 40 years. And also, because of that, and I think most people that move out there move there to get away from the sort of things that we're proposing here. You know, right now, if you drive down, for instance, Sneed Road, you see cattle, you see citrus, you see nurseries, and a couple of houses. And all these other roads are similar. And I just don't think that's out west in Ag 5 is a place for these kind of facilities. We treasure the darkness out there, and any kind of facility that's going to have light and traffic moving in and out, and anything other than an urban environment just doesn't fit in. Quite a few years ago, I served on the county's Smart Growth Advisory Committee, and we studied, you know, how things maybe should proceed and better ways to do things than others. And the one thing you always want to avoid is hopscotching. You plop something out here, and then, well, that got by. Let's do this one, and let's do this, and let's do that. And I just don't think it's the right thing to do. And for a lot of reasons, but as a matter of fact, one, there's a business that I drive by fairly often that was related to agriculture at one point, and it kind of morphed, and it's morphed again, and I'm pretty sure it's totally out of compliance now. And these sort of things happen if you let the camel get its nose under the tent. And so I'm adamantly opposed to it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Good afternoon, Chairman Taylor, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Dan Sorrow with the land planning firm of Kotler and Herring. We did propose the text amendment to the Ag 5 zoning district, which is before you this evening. And if I could just say a couple words. Our client has been a St. Lucie County resident and business operator for decades in the county. They have a agriculture air service with helicopters that are currently housed on property in warehouses that take off and land on that site. They go and spray the citrus crops here locally in St. Lucie County and in other parts of the Treasure Coast in the state of Florida. That's their business. You can't get any more agricultural related than that. And if you've been around runways or airports, you know those helicopters can make a loud noise. Their lights, they could be considered a disturbance to the surrounding community. Commissioner Slack, as far as lighting is concerned, we have no desire to light the property. There's no interest for this to light the property. We have a couple hundred acres that is underutilized right now. The property owner thought, hey, this is a good use for our remaining acreage to be able to open up to have some boat storage and some RV storage on our property that could be used as an extra income source. The issue with the urban service boundary and some of those intense uses in the urban core, when you start having residential developments and a lot of these PUDs and PDs that are coming before you, I suspect within this year and shortly in 2023, very limited storage spaces, very limited for these uses. The urban core is getting filled, and when you look for other areas that have very little trips, very little impact on the surrounding communities, I think this is a logical text amendment that should be encouraged. Commissioner Lowndes, for the 1.5 mile, I agree. I think that if it were expanded, I think it would open up other opportunities for other property owners. We're going to have to pave Peacock Road. It's right at the fairgrounds. We're taking on a considerable investment to be able to move this project forward that a lot of others are going to benefit from. So I think that with the concessions that we're already going to have to make to use this, I think this is a logical step for the county. And I really want to applaud county staff, because originally we came in with a land use amendment, a rezoning, this really convoluted process to be able to get this use. But because it's really a narrow and isolated type condition within the Ag 5 zoning district, this was kind of the preferred path that we took. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Staff did a fantastic job. Got nothing to add to their presentation. Would like for your support this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions you have? Commissioner Lowndes?
Sir, is this project on Peacock Road,
Yes, it is, sir.
behind the fairgrounds?
A couple parcels down from the fairgrounds.
There's plenty of light coming off the fairgrounds, isn't there?
Yes, sir.
And you're gonna pave Peacock Road?
We'll have to bring it up to county standards if we want to be approved at the conditional use permit.
Guardrail and all? Guardrail and all?
Yes, sir.
Lord help you.
Are there any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
I do have one question.
Thank you, Commissioner.
At times, site lighting may be helpful to your site. Would it be possible to put those lights on motion sensors to help keep the lighting levels down if you decide to put in site lighting?
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Okay.
With full cutoff shields as well.
I think that would actually be a good solution to add to the amendment, such that, you know, if we're going to allow this sort of development that far west, that we keep the light to an absolute minimum by enacting something that requires motion sensors so that the lights aren't on all night long.
Okay,
Thank you.
great suggestion. Thank you. If anyone else wishes to address the board, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Bring it back to the board for further discussion and/or a motion.
Mr. Chair, I will, one comment on the motion sensor lights. I know there's a variety of philosophies out there on security, lights on, lights off. And some people like the lights on for security, others like it off, that way you know when there's somebody there. You know, but I think if you make it clear in the ordinance or in the code that requires them to be on motion sensors and not maintain on without occupancy of people, that would be helpful. And now with better cameras, I think we can work in low lighting a lot better with better cameras. So I think you can still maintain security.
Agreed. Yeah, I'd like to see that added in, motion sensors, or at least as part of the standards of review. Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion. Anyone?
Chair Taylor.
Mr. Slack?
After considering the testimony presented during the public hearing, including staff comments, I hereby move that the Planning and Zoning Commission, acting as the local planning agency for St. Lucie County, recommend that the St. Lucie County Board of County Commissioners approve transmittal of the proposed comprehensive plan map and text amendments, including the I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. We are in,
Those are just
that's
suggestions.
B, that's B. I don't have the other one. Anyway. Approving this amendment, including verbiage about requiring motion sensors for site lighting, because I think it will provide some development opportunities in our rural areas without disturbing the local residents nearly as much, and also make lands within the urban service boundary available that are currently used for this less intensive use.
Mr. Chairman, would you consider maker of the motion to extend it to 2 miles instead of 1.5 miles?
That's up to the motioner.
I think 1.5 miles is pretty far as it stands.
We have a motion, is there a second?
A second with the amendment included.
Okay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bridgers?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Slack?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Benner?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Slade?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lowndes?
No, ma'am.
Vice Chair Lowe?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Taylor?
Yes, ma'am. It was 6-1. Motion carries. There's approval. I just want to say kudos to staff for approaching it in this way. I think it's a pretty low impact type of development out west of town, but I like that we're still able to, you know, have it come before the boards to review as a case-by-case basis. I think that makes the most sense. I'm also concerned about the lighting, and I know we can look at each site individually and make sure it works for everybody. So, thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we're going to skip over, I think, 9B, and we'll move on to item 9C. Madam Secretary?
Item 9C, Commercial Neighborhood, CN District, Zoning District. Proposed Land Development Code text amendment to provide for auto home supply stores, hardware stores between 6,001 and 8,000 square feet, and household appliance stores not to exceed 8,000 square feet in floor area as an eligible conditional use in the CN zoning district, along with the hours of operations limited from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay. Mr. Benton again.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. The presented text amendment represented by Todd Mowry of Red Tail Design Group was filed by the applicant Lakewood Property Holdings, LLC, to introduce a variety of retail uses as eligible conditional use in the commercial neighborhood district, again with some size limitations and operational standards pertaining to hours of operation. This proposed text amendment was provided public notice via display ad in the local newspaper as presented. The commercial neighborhood district has a purpose to provide suitable, limited retail trade and service activities covering a relatively small area, and that is intended to serve the population living in surrounding neighborhoods. Simply for context, the most recent modification to the commercial neighborhood zoning district text introduced single-story self-storage facilities as a conditional use within this district. And one of the outcomes and development projects is on South Hutchinson Island, the Barren Island Storage Facility, which has been shown to fulfill this type of purpose, providing storage and access to that demanded amenity to surrounding residents. This evening's text amendment that staff collaborated on fine-tuning some of the details on seeks to do the same, to allow for an increased access to very select retail trade products and goods with provisions that help to ensure compatibility with surrounding residential areas, as well as limitations to avoid adverse impacts to those residential areas. Looking at where our commercial neighborhood districts are located in the unincorporated area, we have 6 main regions. Lakewood Park in North County, some pockets along Orange Avenue as identified in areas 2 and 3, 25th Street and Angle Road, areas in proximity to Okeechobee Road, typically not those parcels abutting Okeechobee Road. Those are typically hold a commercial general zoning designation, but some north and south of those commercial general areas offering some limited commercial uses transitioning to surrounding residential areas. Midway Road along the White City corridor, there are a lot of commercial neighborhood pockets, including increased access to those convenience goods and services demanded by the surrounding area. And again, on both North and South Hutchinson Island, again, some light areas off of Glades Cutoff Road near Range Line. The variety of permitted uses as presented in the staff report and background documentation presents that there's a wide variety of neighborhood convenience and regional or localized commercial services that can be presented, including beauty and barber shops, depository institutions such as banks and other financial services, real estate offices, retail trade, including a variety of products to be sold within a building limited to no more than 6,000 square feet. The size limitation that's applied to retail trade is not applied to some of the other establishments such as membership organizations, which could include a church, a religious organization, a fraternal order, a Kiwanis club, a meeting place, or those types of other establishments offering services. There's no particular cap of size. Commercial neighborhood also allows for a variety of conditional uses, including self-service car washes, postal service locations, gasoline service facilities, including fueling stations, more recently approved 7-Eleven, and even the Wawa off Prima Vista was entertained through allowance under the commercial neighborhood district. And then, as noted previously, the most recent addition, the self-storage facilities limited to enclosed storage. One important highlight for the commercial neighborhood district is the applicability of the county's community architectural standards, These are provisions found in Land Development Code Section 7.10.24 that apply to commercial general, commercial neighborhood, and institutional zones, as well as planned non-residential developments, requiring additional architectural design front-facing of these establishments to help blend and improve corridors in these areas that front-face our arterial roadways or act as transitional areas adjacent to residential communities. The proposal looks to include auto home supply stores not to exceed 8,000 square feet in floor area, offering retail sale of new automobile batteries, parts, and accessories, excluding tire dealers, with limited hours of operation between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. as an eligible conditional use. Hardware stores within an interval of 6,001 square feet to 8,000 square feet in floor area with the same hours of operation. And household appliance stores dealing primarily in new appliances between 6,001 and 8,000 square feet in size with the same operational hours. The balance of uses to increase accessibility to convenience goods and those demanded by residential areas, but within a size limitation and hours of operation that are more conducive to being adjacent or abutting residential areas. And again, the parent conditional use requirement mandating that individual proposals present a site design and proposed use scope through the Planning and Zoning Commission as well as the Board of County Commissioners through the public hearing process on a site-by-site basis to ensure compatibility and compliance with the applicable standards in our Land Development Code. This petition, being consistent with the standards of review identified in Land Development Code Section 11.06.03, being consistent with the county's comprehensive plan, staff is recommending that this body forward a recommendation of approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank
And
you,
the
Mr.
applicant's representative is present this evening as well.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. I had a couple questions. How is the auto home supply and hardware not included in retail trade? I know it says including certain things in the existing language, but it doesn't say limited to those certain things. I'm just wondering. In the current language, it said including, eating places, food stores.
The presented slide includes a general summary or snapshot of the text. Typically within the county's land development code, specifically the zoning districts, we link a standard industrial code as established by OSHA, which provides, in some cases, a very umbrella set of uses and sometimes a very micro set of specific uses. Today, retail trade establishments do not include auto parts stores or home supply stores. Someone's going to a place, a retail establishment for motor oil, an oil filter, car cleaning products, a belt to repair their engine, you name it, or even things like pillows, mattresses, curtains. Those are not currently covered under the scope of retail trade in the CN. Therefore, this text amendment looks to introduce that up to 8,000 square feet. Certainly, staff is willing to garner feedback as it relates to potentially introducing that use in retail trade up to 6,000 square feet as a permitted use, and then allowing the interval between 6,000 square feet and 8,000 square feet to be a conditional use, having that added review. One thing to consider and why staff is, an additional reason why staff is supportive of the proposal is the variety of uses presented for inclusion typically are lower traffic generators, lower demanders of parking and paved surfaces than some of the general discount retail stores, fueling stations, or more of those regional draws. But for instance, if someone's vehicle malfunctions, breaks down, avoiding a trip across town to Walmart or to a store more centrally located, quote, in town or along arterial roadways, might be more challenging. So allowance of this use on potentially a case-by-case basis closer to the population it may serve and the appropriate scale is supported by staff.
Second question was, what's the, I guess, the reasoning behind in the additional language that we have auto home supply stores not to exceed 8,000 square feet, but the hardware and household have a range between 6,000 and 8,000?
And that corresponds, Chair, to the permitted uses. Today, household appliance stores are eligible between 0 and 6,000 square feet. Due to a prior use determination, hardware stores may be acceptable up to 6,000 square feet, but certainly at the ability to place hardware stores to list it outwardly up to 6,000 square feet would be a viable addition to this text.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Lowe?
I'd like to talk a little bit about what he's talking about. Why not leave those numbers open instead of limiting them to 6,000 to 8,000 feet?
Commissioner Lowe, the intent of staff, in our research, we looked outward at the typical size of these neighborhood type stores providing these goods and services, and we typically found a range in the 7 to almost 8,000 square foot size. So we wanted to ensure that there was a cap to where the use wouldn't necessarily have a full regional draw, but have the ability to blend and transition well into the commercial neighborhood district. Again, fulfilling the purpose of providing suitable limited retail trade, covering a relatively small area intended to serve the population in those surrounding neighborhoods. So it was seen as a balance. The applicant embraced those limitations, but certainly if there are modest changes, staff may be able to support that. But again, this body is sought to formulate a recommendation that could include expanded areas for these uses. Again, consideration in the future on a case-by-case basis. We do have some commercial neighborhood parcels that are 2 and 3 acres, and we have some that are a half acre in size. So that could influence the appropriateness of different size and limitations. But
So how big of a lot would a guy have to build an 8,000 square foot building on this?
About half an acre.
there are a variety of factors that would go into that, but I would speculate that they would need at least 3/4 of an acre.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lowndes?
does anybody have the recollection of how big a usual Dollar General is or a auto supply store in town?
I did ask that question. Dollar General, I think we said, was normally about 9 to 12,000 square feet.
Chair Taylor, members of the commission, that's accurate. A lot of the discount retail stores that have been developed in the area recently would exceed 8,500 square feet, typically in that range of 9 to 10,000 square feet. In surveying some of the established and more recently developed auto parts stores, we've observed that range typically between 6,000 and 8,000 square feet. The couple that were slightly over 8,000 square feet were only by a handful of square feet, or one in particular that's been established in the city of Fort Pierce for decades. They have a wholesale component with a lot of storage of auto parts, specialty auto parts, and they supply a lot of our dealerships. So they have more passive stock that's not on retail display for the general public. So that's not necessarily a use that was targeted in a commercial neighborhood area, but the front-facing retail display areas for auto parts typically did not exceed 8,000 square feet.
Mr. Chairman, I kind of agree with Mr. Lowe. I'd like to see it expanded up to about 10,000 instead of 8,000.
Yes.
I think we're going to limit ourselves to what we have.
Would we have the ability to do that on a case-by-case basis?
Chair Taylor, members of the commission, this text amendment would need to establish the framework and the eligibility up to an increased square footage. And then again, during the conditional use review, we can consider traffic generation, the size of the property, if it's the proximity to other potentially incompatible uses, how they design and orient parking and access, those types of variables on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. What you were mentioning about the wholesale aspect of an auto parts store, does the zoning district itself preclude those types of activities since it's supposed to be serving the neighborhood?
Generally, yes, that would be an aspect of staff's review during any conditional use to look at at least a preliminary floor plan to find out if there's stock that would serve non-retail customers, and it certainly would be a factor in our recommendation.
Okay. All right, any other questions from the board?
I agree with Mr. Lowndes too. I wish we could amend that to 10,000 square feet.
Okay. Any other questions for staff at this time? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If there's any member of the public wishing to address the board about this item, please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. For the record, Todd Mowry with Redtail. Appreciate staff's presentation. We really don't have much to add. There was a question that obviously you all are asking as it relates to size limitations. Our initial request to staff was for a limitation of 6,000 to 9,500. So that was in our report. The analysis that staff did, and as they began to go through the process, we did end up agreeing with their analysis. We went through a lot of different buildings, both those that are existing today in the county as well as others that could come into the area to try and look at sizes. And in the end, we did end up coming up with the recommendation that we supported the recommendation that staff had. So if there are any questions that we can add to that. But Mr. Lowndes, to your question in particular, we did go as high as 9,500 was where our request was. We actually have two particular properties on Kings Highway that are a part of this application. One is actually David Wright with Butterfields, and then the other across the street is with Dr. Ionides' property, Lakewood Holdings. And so together, two of those have gone through this. This actually began, though, historically with a request back when Butterfields itself, when their hardware store further down the street was running into an issue. They actually lost their drug use. They pulled that out and they consolidated as they went closer down towards the hospital in Port St. Lucie. But in doing so, they were left just with Ace Hardware. They were then stuck in a situation where Ace Hardware was now in a non-compliant situation because of the size of their space, no fault of their own, but now they were in a situation. This particular amendment would allow them to actually expand slightly compared to where they are, but it is one that's where some of this historically began, and then there are other properties further up Kings Highway that are represented through this request that you're seeing here tonight.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lowndes?
Mr. Mallory, I understand the limiting in the small size, and I would think that the size of a lot would have a great deal of limiting factor to what you can place on it, as Mr. Benton explained, with setback rules and parking rules and such have you. So if you had a small lot, you're not going to put 10,000 square foot building on it. But if you had a larger lot, we would be limiting the availability of that lot if you break it to 8,000. I would rather see us leave it up to the developer's choice of whether he wanted to do 8,000 or 9,500 or 10,000. I don't think to see it exceed 10,000, because then we're getting into a bigger brick and mortar building than the intention.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would say that the one building that we represent actually is about 9,500 square feet. So I know there was one where if they had a use that came in that wanted to use the full facility, this would allow them to do that by using the recommendation you're suggesting. It's one, though, that based upon the staff's recommendation that we supported, it would be one where they would have probably a dual use where they would have to turn a portion of the building into an alternative use, whether it be warehouse storage or something else for that particular size in the space. All these spaces, as you know, they are going to be driven, whether it's an existing building or whether it's a proposed building, on being able to provide for adequate stormwater, being able to provide for parking, open space, landscape buffers, other things that come along for any particular site.
You would recommend the 10,000 then? I hear that from you.
We wouldn't have any objection to that. It is one that I think our request was 9,500, which was based upon our applicant's needs, but we'd be glad to go along with whatever your recommendation is in that area.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant at this time? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mallory.
Thank you very much.
We still are in the public hearing. If there's any other audience members that would like to address the board. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. I'll bring it back to the board for further discussion and a motion.
I make a motion to approve
As is.
with the 10,000 square feet added.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Added to all three or just one?
Yeah, is that to all three different types, auto, home,
Yes.
hardware, and household? Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lowndes. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bridgers?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Slack?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bitter?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Slade?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lowndes?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Lowe?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Taylor?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Benton. All right, we'll move on to item 9D. Madam Secretary.
Item 9D, County-initiated Land Development Code, LDC text amendment proposing to amend the provisions for telecommunication towers located outside of the county's urban service boundary, USB, related to paved access and landscape screening.
Thank you. We'll give Mr. Benton a break.
Give
For
Corey
a
a
little bit.
break here. All right. Good evening, Chairman Taylor and members of the Commission. For the record, Ben Balser. I'm the Assistant Director with the Planning and Development Services Department. Tonight, I'm presenting a county-initiated text amendment to the Land Development Code, Section 7.05.07, provisions for access to new development, and Section 7.10.23, telecommunications tower siting. In accordance with public notice requirements outlined in Section 11.00.03 of the St. Lucie County Land Development Code, public notice for this item was advertised in the St. Lucie News Tribune on Friday, April 8th, 2022. Planning and Development Services staff drafted the proposed text amendment to streamline the regulatory process and eliminate certain requirements or certain regulations that apply to telecommunications towers, specifically when the towers are located outside of the urban services boundary. The subject text amendment looks to exempt new telecommunications towers located outside of the county's USB from the need to provide paved access or proceed through a road paving waiver, which requires approval by the Board of County Commissioners. Currently, paved access is required for all developments that necessitate site plan approval and use unpaved public or private roads for access. If a site plan application for a new telecommunications tower is proposed on a substandard roadway, such as an unpaved roadway, the applicant typically requests a road paving waiver from the Board of County Commissioners. The road paving waiver request requires an engineer's cost estimate to determine the cost of paving the development's road frontage to county standards. Due to the low traffic generation rate of telecommunications towers, the requirement to provide paved access or requiring the road paving waiver process is not warranted. Additionally, the text amendment provides for an exemption from telecommunications towers located outside of the USB from the requirement to provide on-site landscaping to screen the base of the tower if existing native vegetation or an intervening building serves to screen the base of the tower from adjacent rights-of-way or residential uses. The current requirements within the code intend to provide for aesthetic enhancements that will blend the tower into a natural setting and minimize visual impacts. If native vegetation or intervening buildings are present to provide the visual screening from adjacent rights-of-way and surrounding residential uses, the requirement to provide additional landscaping is redundant and does not further the intent of the Land Development Code. The amendment eliminates language that hinders the growing need and demand for reliable wireless communications service and protecting the public health, safety, and general welfare of residents. The text amendment is not anticipated to create an adverse impact associated with tower development pursuant to the paving and landscaping provisions proposed. Staff finds the amendment to meet the standards of review set forth in the St. Lucie County Land Development Code and is not in conflict with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission forward a petition to the Board of County Commissioners with a recommendation of approval. I am available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Balser. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Slack?
are there impact fees paid by telecommunication tower projects?
Are there impact fees? I don't know the answer to that question. Give me 1 second.
That was last month.
I don't believe so.
I don't think they are.
I don't believe so, no.
The reason I ask, you're right, they are extremely low intensity uses.
Mhm.
But when they require service, they often have to bring in a crane, which can damage the roadways.
Mhm.
And so if they were to contribute to our impact fees, they might be able to repair some of the damage. Another alternative might be that if damage is caused by the heavy vehicles required to service said towers, that they be required to repair said damage.
Commissioner Taylor, Slack, there is an opportunity for our Public Works Department to ask for a bond, maybe to repair any roadways that were damaged during construction. What we typically look at is post-construction and what the trip generation rate would be. And we've seen projects as low as 2 trips per month just for service of the towers. So it is extremely low, as you stated. So that's something that we could look at during the site plan review process.
So how would that address the long-term damage caused by heavy cranes being delivered to the site to maintain the upper part of the mast?
I am not familiar with heavy cranes being frequently visiting the site for service. I think that that's an irregular occurrence.
So in order to service the mast, how are they getting up there? If they had to change out a repeater or something?
I am not an expert in telecommunications towers and their service techniques. It is my understanding that the service does not require cranes to frequent the site. Most of it is done by a serviceman or woman scaling the tower and providing that kind of service to the, I don't know the technical term, but providing the service to the tower. I don't think that it's frequent that you will see cranes frequently coming to the site.
Yeah, Mr. Chair? I've got a couple communication towers right outside my old office door, and the 20 years with the existing tower, I never saw a piece of equipment out at the site. And they built a new tower right by the post office there in St. Lucie West, and it was a one-time event. Crane put up the tower, and nobody's been back. You know, if they sneak in, they sneak out. They're in a pickup truck or a car, and you really don't see them.
Great.
Commissioner Lowndes?
Are we eliminating or enhancing the landscape requirement for towers?
Chairman Taylor, Mr. Lowndes, we are eliminating the landscaping requirement if there already is an existing native vegetation buffer from that screening the adjacent residential uses or the rights-of-way. That buffer could also include an intervening building. So if there was something that was used to block the visual impact
from adjacent rights-of-way or residential use, we are eliminating that requirement for additional landscaping.
Try to hide a telecommunication tower with landscape, like trying to hide a giraffe in a shoebox. It ain't gonna happen.
Correct. And just for the record, the landscaping requirements are fairly minimal. It's a 10-foot wide landscape buffer around the base of the tower with a continuous hedge and
It's
one tree
basically
every 30 feet.
For equipment on a low level.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. If there's any member of the public wishing to address the board, please come forward. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for further discussion or a motion. And a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Bitter?
after considering testimony during the public hearing, I motion to approve text amendment, amending section 7507 and 71023 telecommunication towers because it makes sense.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bridges?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Slack?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Benner?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Slay?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lowndes?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Lowe?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Taylor?
Yes, ma'am. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Mr. Balser. Okay, let's bring us to item 9B, Madam Secretary.
Item 9B, Local Planning Agency, LPA hearing, comprehensive plan text and map amendments, amending the urban service boundary, establishing a planning study area, and revising associated objectives and policies.
All right, and we're back with Mr. Benton.
Good
Take it
evening
away.
again, Chair Taylor, members of the commission. Just for context, this particular proposal, which is county initiated, which encompasses both a comprehensive plan map and text amendments, both looking to expand the county's urban service boundary, but also identify and establish a set of planning study areas and then some policy guiding those study areas. The public hearing was originally slated and scheduled for March 17th before this commission, and it was continued after lengthy discussion of the impact fee ordinances and modifications. Therefore, we are here tonight. Simply
I do
for
recall that.
simply for context, and you know, I apologize again of how lengthy that meeting was. But the two matters do run parallel and have some overlap in considering public facilities, the cost to deliver those public facilities and infrastructure, and the approach to deliver those efficiently, to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, and to have design and evaluation consideration of how our community grows, where it grows, and of course, how it grows. So the public hearing in March was noticed via display ad in the local newspaper. Public hearing was opened and continued to this evening. We'll dive into the background of the urban service boundary, but the Board of County Commissioners initiated this proposal with a commitment to plan for imminent and future development in our county, provide policy direction to where we should target growth, and a plan for infrastructure investments in these projected growth areas. Again, the county has been inclusive of the cities, have been very successful in promoting manufacturing, targeted industry, causing substantial job growth in our community. And again, the market has supported expansion of retail and residential growth as we're experiencing in areas of our community. The urban service boundary itself, as presented on screen, was adopted in 1990. If you recall at the last hearing, there was that talking point of 32. You know, 32 years since the establishment of the urban service boundary, and no substantial changes or modification, at least to the county's policy relating to the urban service boundary line since that time. We've seen a lot of growth, particularly in Port St. Lucie and the annexation area that has pushed their urban service boundary further west. But the purpose behind the urban service boundary is to direct future development to areas where urban and community services facilities can be provided in the most efficient and compact manner so as to discourage a proliferation of urban sprawl. At the time of establishment of this line, 32 years ago, the county's population was roughly 150,000 individuals. With the 2020 census, the count for St. Lucie County is nearly 330,000 individuals and increasing. This represents nearly a 120% increase in population over that period of time, again with no adjustments to the urban service boundary. And so this evening, the proposed modifications and the two components of the comprehensive plan amendments present the necessity to analyze future growth needs and demands. And within staff's report and the backup documentation, we've highlighted different trends, population projections as published in some of the Transportation Planning Organization's documentation, looking at some facts and figures and projections from the St. Lucie County School District, amongst other trends as development has occurred in our community. And we'll dive into that a little bit further. To present, again, reiterate the overview of the two proposal components, the first being expansion of the urban service boundary in an identified area in South County to become effective immediately, accounting for Port St. Lucie's western annexation area and a large-scale future land use map amendment for a development known as Oak Ridge Ranch. And two, to establish two planning areas and policy corresponding with those for Middle and North County areas. And those are particularly the area in green considered to be an agricultural limited service planning area, and the area in orange being considered our North County planning study area. The collective amendments would have specific changes to our future land use map and identifying where the urban service boundary is to accommodate the presented expansion, to modify the existing land use map with the same modification, to adjust the urban service boundary exhibit within our comprehensive plan, and to remove the urban service boundary from the coastal planning area map as it may be seen as a duplicate exhibit. And additionally, through the text of the county's comprehensive plan, amend objective 1.16, corresponding policies 1.161 and 1.162, and create a new policy which we'll dive into a little bit further. As presented in the background analysis for this proposal, the percentage of growth in population from 2015 to the 2045 projections for this planning period, the models are projecting nearly 80% growth in population and a corresponding growth in employment of roughly 75%. The exhibit figure 18 presented on screen is part of the county's long-range transportation plan known as Smart Moves 2045. The deeper purple and blue colors identify pockets and projected areas of population and employment growth that were utilized by collaborative agencies and team members of the TPO and the body serving the TPO in projecting roadway needs and other elements for consideration of that type of infrastructure.
Just one question on that. Why are we using 2015 numbers when we just had 2020 on the previous slide?
The TPO's adopted 2045 plan occurred last year in early 2021, and I don't believe the final census figures were available during that, but they do consider there are some census projections in between the 10-year periods, and so they've utilized a lot of that data and then other models. But yes.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
So as noted, obviously roughly 330,000 people in 2020, so substantial growth of roughly 40,000 residents in that 5-year span. The overlay in black dashed area identifies the area presented for immediate expansion of the county's urban service boundary. This slide presents the acknowledged growth and expansion of the city of Port St. Lucie. Over time, the city has annexed a substantial amount of land outside of the county's urban service boundary, including 3 large-scale developments known as developments of regional impact within roughly 24,000 acres of land identified in the city limits there, including Tradition, Western Grove, and Southern Grove. The exhibit highlights planned or completed roadways within that area, and we'll dive a little deeper into other public facilities typically correlated with an urban service area to serve the public in that urban growth. But noted on screen are the LTC Ranch project adjacent to I-95 and Midway Road, which was approved by St. Lucie County in the 90s and then annexed into the city of Port St. Lucie. The development occurring there today includes Amazon's 1 million square foot distribution facility at the southeast corner of I-95 and Midway, and the Wilder development, as it's been recoined, west of I-95, which would include residential, commercial, non-residential development. Copper Creek, of course, a development with residential homes, and the St. Lucie County Allapattah Flats K-8 school. And of course, within the southern areas, the one projection west of Rangeline Road is City of Port St. Lucie's owned McCarty Ranch Reserve. So looking a little closer at the St. Lucie County Urban Service Boundary Expansion area and some of the established and areas for potential planned public facilities, including schools, fire stations, libraries, parks, the county's fairgrounds, established golf courses, and then the roadways that are identified in the Transportation Planning Organization's roadway needs plan to serve the growth projected, underway, and anticipated within this area. So the expansion area, you can see the northern boundaries extending up to Midway Road and State Road 70, Okeechobee Road, including the areas annexed into the city of Port St. Lucie, as previously mentioned, and extending a little further west, again, wrapping the boundaries of the future land use map amendment that is petitioned for the Oak Ridge Ranch project. Within the staff report presented and with some exhibits that we may discuss this evening, the areas outside of the city of Port St. Lucie limits are St. Lucie County utility service areas, in which the county's long-range plan has identified goals of investing in infrastructure to support central water and wastewater services targeted in these areas. We do have existing infrastructure connected along Okeechobee Road to the fairgrounds and that along Midway Road, and goals to expand that in order to serve these areas in the unincorporated area. This is a look at the future land use designations within the immediate urban service expansion area. Again, of the roughly 28,000 acres included in this expansion, nearly 18,000 acres are already within the city of Port St. Lucie's jurisdiction, which are heavily designated within the residential golf course or new community development categories. There's also a mix of commercial and low density and medium density residential districts within the city's jurisdiction. And then within St. Lucie County, it's identified predominantly within the AG5 agricultural future land use category, but also the public facilities centered around the county's fairgrounds. The urban service boundary expansion area does include the area that the county has studied around the fairgrounds to include an adventure or an entertainment district where the arterial roadways of Midway Road and Okeechobee intersect. There are some industrial land use designations. They're at the southwest intersection of Glades Cutoff Road and Rangeline Road that are projected to be included in this urban service boundary expansion. Again, as noted, collectively 28,000 acres change, of which roughly 10,000 remains in the county's jurisdiction. The other area accounting for Port St. Lucy's growth, their extension, their urban service boundary, and annexations. Then shifting to the second component of the proposal, identification of planning study areas. When this matter was discussed before the Board of County Commissioners at 2 different informal meetings and prior to the permission to advertise the proposal before the Planning and Zoning Commission, staff had engaged in dialogue with various parties, but also the Board of County Commissioners, looking at where a logical demarcation is for planning the future establishment of the urban service boundary. One train of thought was to establish the urban service boundary aligned parallel to Header Canal, which is the western boundary here, and look at different policies to infill how growth continues to progress, pushing westward from I-95 and the Turnpike West as proposals occur. Staff's refined presentation this evening and more intricate details present 2 planning study areas to look at them based upon established land uses, environmental lands that may be contained within it, the current infrastructure serving those areas, the roadways, and then look at potential needs, but also have a balance of considering growth needs and needs to allocate space for residential and more urban development activities, and then inclusive of that area around I-95 and Indrill Road that encompasses some lands within the towns, villages, and countryside area, but then some additional lands further west that are some evolving or potentially transitioning agricultural areas adjacent to recent infrastructure investments in both Indrill Road, but also utilities in North County. The goals behind the planning study area, which we'll identify some here shortly, to evaluate, again, growth needs, the timeline at which these areas could be included in the urban service area, and then any policies and guidance to potential amendments, rezonings, and other pressures for development in that area, but to ensure that, and distinguished by the 2 separate planning study areas, the rural character and the established development pattern within the agricultural limited service area planning boundaries, and then North County, which is more of an open-ended book or a clean canvas, or a more bare canvas based upon some of the geographic considerations and limited property owners north of the Florida's Turnpike, largely within that planning study area, much lower quantity of property owners as we see owners holding thousands of acres from either active or previously active crop production areas or agricultural lands. So some of the study area policies presented by staff, the consideration and assessment of these areas to determine if the boundary needs to be adjusted to support urban growth through a 2050 planning horizon, considering population growth projections through that horizon, review of existing land use patterns, inventory of vacant land within the current urban service boundary and that of the expansion area, if approved, forecast of the land needed to accommodate projected population growth, and employment forecasts, which are important to consider, growth trends, market conditions, and pressures of development in the Treasure Coast region, a forecast of land needed to accommodate commercial and industrial growth projected, an inventory of public facilities and services that need to be provided as we have established levels of service for those high quality, highly demanded public facilities that we discussed to ensure a high quality of life for our community and the efficient delivery of those services, and what potential balance of those services could be provided in those planning study areas where needed, and then review of existing infrastructure and again those needs we talked about with our impact fee updates, the costs oriented with supporting expanded growth and development, and then in inventory of lands intended to be protected from encroachment of urban development to preserve natural resources, rural communities, and agricultural uses. And then some additional policies. Because the study is sought to provide that data and analysis to then reconvene, consider the findings and what the results may lead to, and further identifying some of the policy that could respond to those outcomes and those conclusions. Based upon the standards for review in the county's comprehensive plan and adopted within Florida statute, staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission, acting as the local planning agency, order a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to transmit this proposed set of comprehensive plan amendments to expand the urban service boundary, updating the various map exhibits, but also establish the urban service boundary assessment process with two distinct planning study areas, and establish the presented criteria, finding the proposal collectively consistent with the county's adopted comprehensive plan and Florida statutes.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. Are there any questions of staff at this time? Really? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If there's any member of the public wishing to address the board on this item, please come forward.
Good evening, members of the board. Mike McCarty with McCarty Land Planning. I'm here representing a property owner, my family, off of Rangeline Road. In looking at some of these maps and exhibits proposing expansion of the urban service boundary, there's an area that I want to bring to your attention, more specifically along Rangeline Road. And there's a segment of land in between the McCarty Ranch Preserve, south to the Treasure Coast Air Park. There you go. Thank you, Corey. And you'll see there's a significant chunk that's just kind of left out. I'm here specifically to represent the 245 acres that abuts the industrial corner, if you will, or triangle at the intersection of Glades Cutoff and Rangeline Road. Our property directly abuts the southern boundary of heavy industrial land that is served by the FEC rail. We have a rail easement that crosses through this industrial land and extends to our 245-acre citrus grove. It's currently agricultural. And our future intentions are to do a land use amendment to industrial and to establish a location within St. Lucie County that will expand on industrial users, manufacturing, heavy industrial, light industrial, warehousing, potentially cross-docking facilities that can utilize the rail and ultimately connect to our ports, Port of Miami, Port Everglades, help with our supply chain issues that we have in our country, and create an opportunity for jobs and tax base. We've got housing that is expanding throughout Port St. Lucie at a pace of a plague, and it's time that we establish some more business area. I know we have light industrial throughout the county, however, heavy industrial is rare, let alone industrial with rail service. Our Citrus Grove has an easement that connects to the FEC K branch, and we would respectfully request that the urban service boundary at least include our 245 acres. Aside from that, from a planning perspective, I'm not sure why there's a gap in between Rangeline Road and McCarty Ranch down to Treasure Coast Air Park. It would be my opinion as a professional land planner that you guys take into consideration including that acreage. I'm not here representing those owners, but from a planning perspective, it would seem to be wise. At least I would request that you include our property within that boundary as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lowndes?
Mr. McCarty?
Yes, sir.
As a land planner, what advantage does expansion provide to you?
Our future plans are to be, change the land use designation to industrial and to ultimately develop an industrial park out there that would be rail served. And so it would be necessary for us to have urban services. It would be wise.
That would be water, sewer, and such have you?
Correct.
That you don't have now?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The water main, range line.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members again. In sort of in concert with what you just heard with Mr. McCarty, also represent the property just to the south of his, going all the way up to the entrance that the city has to McCarty Ranch. So again, on the west side of Range Line, they as well would like to have the urban service growth boundary line be considered for that same area. So Mr. Carty is representing the north side, we have the south side of that area. And so I think similarly suited, I know the city of Port St. Lucie has been talking about that area. There have been some discussions of where they're going to finish their annexations and where they want to go. But regardless, it appears as though it's definitely one of those pockets that is being sort of caught in limbo, where you have the city of Port St. Lucie with the McCarty Ranch on the west, and then you have Range Line on the right with all the development that's going on with Tradition. So I think you're going to see not only the roadway system, which is being expanded and connecting perpendicular to Range Line, but as Mr. McCarty mentioned, you have the rail line and you have heavy industrial that's going on in that area today that exists. And so it's really one where, with that currently being there, I'm sort of surprised that there's a little pocket that's being left out. So we would ask that that area as well be considered as a part of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dan Sawyer with the land planning firm of Kotler and Herring. I too represent a property owner west of Range Line Road with 421 acres that lines up with Discovery Road. We too would like the urban service boundary expanded to include that place in between McCarty Ranch and Western Grove and Riverland Kennedy. Furthermore, I think we're at a critical point now looking at the future of the county and where growth is going to occur. And although I love the planning study area that was highlighted, those two areas north of Midway Road, we would humbly request that those two be included in the urban service boundary. And the reason is simple. You still get another opportunity to approve or deny a land use application, right? If it doesn't meet the comprehensive plan, it doesn't meet state statute, you still have every opportunity to turn down an application if it doesn't meet the requirements. But what we see often in St. Lucie County is what I call fragmented acreages, to where you have 100 acres here, a couple hundred acres here. You can't really do large developments, large communities, housing communities and new master plans for that small of an acreage. You really need the abandoned citrus areas to do large developments, to where you can have a full service amenity center, where you can have a retail component. So if that line were to go all the way up Header Canal Road, tie into Indrio, we have submitted the land use application for Oak Ridge Ranches. There's not too many Oak Ridge Ranches left in St. Lucie County, so we need to start considering other non-producing agricultural farms. And not just for solar. These are the areas that really make good use for residential lands along Indrio. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. How convenient that all three of you here for three different things and two items on the same agenda. Is there anyone else from the public that wish to address the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Just some comments. I think they bring up some good points. If you look at the Crosstown Parkway extension, is going to be going directly to Range Line. Port St. Lucie's coming to Range Line already, and I think it makes more sense to push it a little further west, especially in this southern portion of the county, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I don't think there's, like, to me, I think the plan and study stuff is just, I mean, the growth is coming. When we need to study, like, the whole county's blowing up, right? So, we just need to get ahead of the ball. To me, you go ahead and you approve all of it. There's no reason for what the piece they're talking about on Rangeline to be landlocked between Rangeline and McCarty Ranch. It's kind of absurd for that to be kind of etched out right there. So I completely agree with Mike about moving that over to budding up from the Treasure Coast Air Park to McCarty Ranch to Glades Cutoff. And I'm for approving all of it.
Mr.
So-
Chairman.
Do we have have you looked at any alternative maps at that location, the bottom corner, and where to expand it?
Chair Taylor, members of the commission, there has been dialogue and staff consideration of where that line might be most appropriate along range line. As displayed in this aerial, there are obviously McCarty Ranch being publicly owned and preserved with wetlands and native areas. Further to the west, FP&L having a physical barrier boundary in the solar generation facility. Port St. Lucie having pockets of the water farm and the Vulcan mine, kind of offering some geographic boundaries or logical geographic boundaries, at least in those regions. And then you can see that pocket area that's not shaded, a lot of native habitat and wetlands. But looking at the pocket east of McCarty Ranch, south of the established industrial land use, and north of the Treasure Coast Air Park, I draw attention to the dashed yellow line.
The what?
The dashed yellow line on screen.
Okay.
Within the county's comprehensive plan, there is a line that references the urban service boundary not necessarily being a static line, but considering a 1,500-foot buffer or extension of that could be claimed or considered when considering a land use proposal, public infrastructure investment, or similar, to where in theory the policymakers could look at the urban service boundary up to a 1,500-foot extension of that. So if the line as presented this evening were established at Rangeline Road, a 1,500-foot boundary could be proclaimed beyond that, which would allow for the county to look at investment in roadways, in water, wastewater, or similar to serve those prospective projects, to allow for, as we noted, evaluation of land use changes to a non-residential mixed-use proposal, or even a little bit more dense proposal than the AG5. But staff, in looking at some of the wetland areas and the dynamics of this land in proximity to an established community in the Treasure Coast Air Park, looking for that balance of how far west the urban service boundary is considered in this area. But again, that's feedback from the public, stakeholders, and this commission is of value as a recommendation is formulated and presented to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, so if we all agree that it needs to be including this southwestern portion, where would you recommend the line go to?
In theory, it could extend to the shaded boundaries. In theory, it could also stop 1,500 feet shy of the Treasure Coast Air Park. There are a variety of ways to consider it. Back to the 1,500-foot buffer, for instance, if the county were to invest in water lines in this region extending along Rangeline Road, there's the balance. There's nothing precluding private investment to extend infrastructure or to extend water and wastewater lines to serve and or retrofit a development like the Treasure Coast Air Park. But there's some consideration of using public dollars or taxpayer dollars to extend and include areas either within the urban service boundary or outside.
Mr.
And so
Benton, they're gonna pay for that through impact fees anyway.
there certainly would be some offsets through connection fees.
Is Treasure Coast Air Park like, if we move this boundary back, is Treasure Coast Air Park not able to go inside of that boundary? Are they trying to be excluded, or?
There's certainly the ability for them to be included in the urban service boundary. Thinking of some long-range dynamics, because they do have an airfield. Again, the county through this proposal is not presenting any future land use map amendments as far as designations and categories assigned to property. So their continued use of a residential community that has the air park and takeoff and landing fields could continue, but the potential for someone to propose a more urban type development immediately adjacent, we could have some conflicting or nuisance concerns regarding incompatible uses, but there's a lot of uncertainty in that.
I mean, when
think
those planes take off and they go across Rangeline Road to the east, there's like, how many thousands of homes are we building right there? It's kind of the same mentality, right?
To an extent, yes.
I think it's a preference thing, I would guess, for them.
But certainly, if the proposal is to expand, include this area, presenting a defining line and any potentially geographic boundaries that are logical.
How did you come up with the other yellow line? 'Cause that's like east of Carlton Road right there. Like where,
The boundaries
to the
that shift to the west include the boundaries of the future land use map amendment petition that's in for the Oak Ridge Ranch project that proposes a mixed use future land use for more urban development. And then picks back up again parallel here. And then includes what would be the expansion area.
yeah, 'cause I guess the simple thing in my mind is what you got there. You go out Carlton, you include Sneed, and you just get all of it in there, and then it's done. Right?
Yeah.
Instead of stopping at Header, why not go to Sneed? It's the only road left to the west, and then it's all inclusive, and just let growth be growth.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Slack?
I'm glad we're looking at doing studies of the two areas in the center and the northern part of the county. We talk about let growth be growth, but it's really important to have a map, not just on a piece of paper, but a real plan for how to structure that growth so that it happens in a way that brings value to the community. I have concerns about unfettered growth by vast expansion of the urban services boundary, inviting very large-scale growth that is sprawl, very uniform development of a single type, for example, single-family housing, that's done in a way that's not particularly compact or walkable. And what we end up doing is, as more and more people move to our community, I mean, we're seeing the population growth. And if we don't develop it in a way that's dense, that allows for public transportation to provide some relief for our clogged roadways, we can end up looking like Little Broward. And I have concerns that we don't have a plan in place before moving the boundary. I'd much rather see some thoughtful construct laid out, such as the lengthy community effort brought forth when we were developing the TVC. And I'm not suggesting that we apply the TVC all over the county. But what I am suggesting is that we get more community input as to how people would like to see this growth happen, rather than just opening the door to any type of development and promising to carry services out very far west, so that our county grows in a very undense, sparse pattern west of town, rather than working to infill in a denser way more within our current urban services boundary. I do appreciate that you guys are proposing to look into the two study areas, because those are crucial. I think we need to do more than just look at projections of population growth and go farther to the point where we're planning some sort of structure in which that growth could occur. Structure where we're thoughtful about bringing work and home together, where we're thoughtful about densifying development, about creating nodes that can be connected with public transportation so that we don't end up stuck in vehicles, snarled in traffic, and not having any options because all we have is gated communities of one uniform homogeneous type. We really need to carefully consider how we're going to do that growth. I agree with Mr. McCarty that we do need additional industrial in this county. We're very short on industrial lands and opportunities for that sort of growth. And we need to figure out how to interconnect it with, as he said, the rail line and other transportation modes, and protect our residential and mixed-use areas from the heavy industry. So I'm not familiar with the Oak Ridge Ranch development. Perhaps somebody could give a bit of an explanation of that for the public who's listening in, and why we would propose moving the urban services boundary now beyond Shin Road. Right now, there's a lot of agricultural land there, and people who are living there hoping that it remains agricultural, and there's still a lot of land undeveloped east of Shin Road, and there's a lot of infill land remaining within our urban services boundary, and I'd like to see us try to densify that to make sure that we are thoughtful in our planning and our use of our existing land before we begin sprawling farther and farther west. Because yes, that new development will provide impact fees to build the roads, but will it be dense enough to provide the tax base to continue to maintain those roads? In Palm Beach County, they have development that's gone very far west, but it's developed in such a loose way that it's not providing enough of a tax base to keep up with the repairs needed. And I don't want to see that happen to St. Lucie County.
Mr. Chair?
Sanders.
A couple things. One is, when Port St. Lucie annexed all of the southwest annexation area, which includes Riverland, Verano, Wilson Grove, and Southern Grove, there were 5 landowners. And they put together a master plan that had the roadway network, the schools outlined, the whole plan. So as crazy as it may seem today, there was a plan, and they did a pretty good job of planning those roadways because, and we were fortunate we only had 5 landowners. And if you start looking at these areas of expansion of the urban service area, there's some areas, as Corey mentioned earlier, that have, a low number of landowners, like up in the north part of the county in the old Capron Trails and that area, and some of the areas out, even some of the areas in mid-county, but there's a lot of 5-acre lots as well. There is a water main already along Range Line Road that the city of Port St. Lucie owns that's serving Riverland, Wilson Grove, Verano. So it's not a surprise that you got water right at that area. And if you also look at those lands along Range Line Road, they're all, I believe is that a half mile wide, or are they a mile deep? They're pretty deep. They go all the way to the McCarty Ranch, to the city's McCarty Ranch property. So it would make sense to include those areas out to the city. The other thing I was going to point out that, there's about 45 square miles shown in this southern segment being increasing the urban service area, but about 16 square miles of that is the city of Port St. Lucie that's already, in essence, moved this urban service boundary. So there's only about 28 square miles total, not the 44 that's shown. So it looks bigger than it is because you're including all of the city of Port St. Lucie land that is in effect has a different urban service boundary line because they have not recognized the county's urban service boundary. So there's a lot to think about. we are working on school plans for all of that area. We've been planning on that, personally been working on it since 2002, to make sure that we have schools where we need them. And we've been fortunate, we worked hand in hand with local government and the developers in that southwest area, LTC Ranch, and we're now working with Oak Ridge Ranch as well. So, you know, the point is, there's a lot going on there, and without a roadway network to serve some of those lands, it's going to be really hard to make things work without some other type of development that doesn't rely on coming back into town to work or to go to school and all those other things.
Thank you.
Question.
Mr. Lowe?
Mr. Benton, a question. I've been the last few months getting involved in some affordable housing. Where would it fall in St. Lucie County's planning right today?
Chair Taylor, Vice Chair Lowe, affordable housing could be proposed in a wide variety of zoning districts in St. Lucie County. So much depends upon the effectiveness, the appropriateness, and having, again, the services and the support mechanisms to make it viable or productive. Typically, you would encourage affordable housing in areas that, as Commissioner Slack indicated earlier, that are more dense, that are adjacent to public transit, libraries, schools, parks within walking distance, access to employment, so more well-established areas or areas that provide for more dense growth. So there is that access and concentrated form of public facilities available. But in looking at large, affordable housing can be a component of a new large project where it's integrated, and the county, through our comprehensive plan, has various policies that support increased density or other incentives or concessions to support affordable housing as new projects come online or even infill projects are considered. Our community services team has formulated an affordable housing task force, which one of our county commissioners serves on, amongst a wide variety of staff and personnel tasked with strategically looking at ways to invite, facilitate, and maintain affordable housing in our community.
The people that I've met with, the first things you commented about what you would need, you were right. The only thing you left out was water and sewer. That was the first thing that they all told me about. So you have to find you couldn't start building out west of I-95, even near the fairgrounds. There's not much water on the north side of Okeechobee Road. There's water going into the fairgrounds from south of Okeechobee Road. So there's not much land to build in town if you're going to build, say, 500 units project, which is going to build these projects. And I visited some of them already in the last few months up in Tallahassee, and very successful county ventures. Indian River County is also looking to put one in. So I get a lot of calls on people asking me where would they put them. So looking for some advice.
I certainly think we can establish and schedule a meeting to discuss it, but you know, as presented on screen, these are some of the core urban services and largely publicly provided services that when we consider areas of dense development, affordable housing, because it's key to have the housing be affordable, but also the lifestyle associated with the location of that housing, the type of the housing. For instance, you know, walkability, alternatives to vehicle use, having access to things like natural gas, which can lower utility costs, not only for heating a home, supporting appliances, but those well-rounded public amenities that our community demands. Ensuring that it's safe as well is a key component, but solid waste collection, management, emergency response, our ability to supply fire EMS services, and then even medical care for our community. And as we talk about with employment, employees are demanding a trained workforce and folks that have skills. And so having educational facilities, as Commissioner Sanders indicated, but also our higher educational institutions within New River State College being a partner and looking at how our county's growing and providing both in-person education opportunities, but also remote learning.
I think I'd like to meet with you sometime when you have time, and I'll bring you the information that we have already put together, and see what we can do for the people in the county.
Certainly, Chair, Vice Chair.
Mr. Slay, how many, or what percentage of the county do you think is in the urban service boundary that doesn't have urban services?
Because there is such a wide variety of urban services, I would venture to say that within our current urban service boundary, a significant portion at least have access to paved roadways, schools, parks, libraries, fire EMS, and shorter durations of response times. But there are certainly areas within our established urban service boundary that don't have potable water, central water, or central wastewater. They have potable water through wells and treatment devices, but not the centralized services in some areas. That's obviously been a goal of the county to expand access to those utilities. We do have our utility director present, George Landry, and that's on our short-term and long-range goal to provide refinement and invest in that infrastructure, to invest in our community. But Fort Pierce Utilities Authority and Port St. Lucie Utilities have looked to expand that capital investment specifically in the urban service area.
Sure. But I would say we would assume that there's some people who know they live within urban services or have urban services that don't have access to all the urban services, and it's not a big deal to them, right? I myself included. Right? I don't have street lights. I don't have sidewalks. Right? There's a lot of things that I don't have under urban services. I don't care if I have them. Right? So to the point of if we move that boundary line, regardless, still people are moving into those areas knowing that those services aren't available yet. Right? We would be planning ahead.
In Commissioner Slay, I think that the balance in staff's perspective, when we talk about the terminology of maybe a limited service area, we look at the growth patterns, we look at the urban services that might be the most cost effective to supply large lot development or estate ranchettes, having clean central water or wastewater for the overall benefit of the environment, but not necessarily looking at investment in streetlights on small rural roadways or neighborhood roadways, but looking at stormwater improvements, looking at arterial roadway investment, and looking at different ways to serve those areas uniquely based upon what owners and stakeholders are demanding, but not offer the entire spread, because there is that balance in lifestyle that we understand is demanded in the maintaining the rural character, to not invite in a 15 unit per acre development adjacent to development that's well established at 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. So it's certainly a balance, and the goal of the planning study area is to consider, again, the growth horizon through 2050, look at those types of characteristics and development patterns we have in our community, and explore through a public process what facilities do people prioritize living in the current urban service boundary area, but also outside, and is there an array or a subset through a limited service area where there's expectations provided to existing citizens outside or within these study areas, large-scale property owners who might look at investment or new developments. So there's a good perspective on how that area is anticipated to grow and what's appropriate to ensure public safety and welfare.
So let's say NGO Road, for instance, right? It's built out to 27th Street, right? So you've got a mile longer to go from 27th to 95. right, on the same road. So that, it doesn't make sense to me why we're studying that when we know that the growth is coming from here to here, right? So and the reality of it is if we don't do some things sooner or later, like we all talk about the water issues, right? So if we continue to allow the western Fort Pierce to constantly be built up, new houses, everybody's on septic. Time everybody gets on septic, nobody wants to switch to sewer, right? That's a whole nother thing we're trying to fight, right? Septic tanks and things like that of such. So if we don't move the boundary lines out, and Indrio mostly, you got all that growth in Lakewood Park or the north part of Fort Pierce that's already established, right? So we only have to go 3/4 of a mile longer to 95. Anything west of Indrio is not going to happen too quick, right? Because you got one or two landowners out there, unless one of them wants to give something up. But at least to 95, and you already know there's a ton of growth coming to Indrio Road. The road's already been fixed. It's prime ready to go. So I don't understand what the so much of the planning process is, because you guys can figure that out as the growth is coming.
And Commissioner Slay, I think for context and why staff is strongly encouraging the planning study areas, particularly North County, certainly Indrio Road out to I-95 has been expanded, reconstructed with an excerpt there between Emerson and Turnpike Feeder Kings Highway that's still narrow, but there are not a lot of support east-west corridors. There's not a lot above and beyond Indrio Road, and so if looking at a local example like St. Lucie West Boulevard that has a lot high traffic volumes, but a low level of service, that experience and the movement of traffic, we want to look at growth projections, look at potential infrastructure needs, and help to lay out where a logical realm for roads, stormwater, parks, school facilities could be. And because at the moment we have a limited set of property owners, engage those stakeholders as well as the general public to look at how that area should and would grow. But considering expansion of central water and wastewater, and George Landry, our utility director, joined me, there's a cost component. If you look at a geographic area, a 2-mile stretch, and the projected density or the projected units that would connect to those services, there's obviously a correlation of cost per unit for public investment. So when we look at more compact growth, more dense growth, tying into those utilities, it lowers that ratio where it may be only $1,500 or $2,000 per unit to provide that service, whereas when you have a more rural spread out area, it could be $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 per home to provide that same service. So that's part of the balance in that study area of what are the services demanded by the public, what's a consideration for efficient way to supply that, whether it's long, lengthy lines or target areas where there is more density, the smaller lots, acre and a half, as opposed to 5-acre lots. But it's part of that analysis.
Now I know at one time we were pushing water out to Lakewood Park. Did all that get declined, or they voted against it or something?
I believe what you may be referencing is either municipal service boundary unit or benefit unit or taxing unit where the property owners can elect to have a future tax assessment to help prorate the costs of establishing those services or infrastructure over 10, 15, 20, 30 years, almost an alternative to a community development district. But I think Mr. Landry can highlight on where investment in utilities is at with regards to Lakewood Park.
So, Chairman, Commissioners, George Landry, Director of Public Utilities and Solid Waste. For the record, to answer your question, Commissioner, there is a proposed MSBU in the works, and the ballots to the Lakewood Park residents shall be going out probably within the next 2 weeks, plus or minus a few days. They have until June 30th, once they receive the ballot, to review everything, get all the information they need, and return it to the county with their vote, yes or no. So that's
and what are they voting on?
For water, to bring potable water to Lakewood Park.
Okay, because that's something been talked about for a while, right? And it's kind of been back and forth there.
That is correct, yes. So With regards to what's being presented to you this evening, the reason why the focus is on the urban service boundary move in the southern part of the county is with the activity of the recent development that's in the works. So with that, the county utility had developed a plan and proposed to the Board of County Commissioners, which was approved to expand utility services out Okeechobee Road for both water and sewer. We're west of the Turnpike 95, about where the Seminole Tribe area is. We're going to continue that all the way out to the Header Canal area, tying into Midway and running the same services back towards Midway east to 95 Turnpike area, where we have some dry line connections sitting there, tying in that whole network, and then going south down Header Canal, ending right around C24, which is the top of the Oak Ridge Ranch development, which is a pretty sizable development. With that, once an agreement's established with them, we'll continue on down to Range Line and Glades Cutoff is our goal point to hit there. Our service boundaries between us and the city of PSL's utility is Range Line Road. So they're Range Line Road east, they're Shin Road east, we're west. So we would have to provide the infrastructure and service west of Range Line Road. So as development permits, we'll continue to expand that service west of Range Line Road, down to the Martin County border. Sorry, long day today and yesterday. Forgive me. So that's kind of the plan of that. The reason why we're looking at the study in the north, and it may seem like as you're saying, common sense would say certain things. However, it gives us that time to analyze what the potential growth areas are and how can we serve them the most smartly to not have such a negative impact on rates, on cost of things, because as you know, with the utility, it has to be funded by its own customer base. It doesn't get taxpayer support unless it's through a method of an MSBU for that area that it's affecting, so to say. So we have to generate our own opportunity to expand that service. So it's critical that we do things tying in with development and partner with the developers to help bring those services out. The reason why Indio Road has service out to 95 for both water and sewer was a developer came to us and offered to pay for that infrastructure at 100% of their own expense to connect where we were at near Kings Highway area in Indio, and they ran it west out to 95. We, during that time frame, negotiated and paid for the expansion, the upsize of those pipes, because we figured there's going to be additional growth that comes with them, so we did that. And so that's why that little area has that capability, and we have plans to continue up Emerson to the Indian River border and fill in a few gaps that were along the way on Indio Road that we're missing as part of that process to secure that system. We're also in the process of planning to put some water treatment plants and a wastewater treatment plant up in that area as well as down near the fairgrounds area, so to be able to have some redundancy to serve our customers. So that's kind of why what's proposed to you is to kind of fit that means, and then as development goes, expand that boundary.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lyons?
a little side note, why would you extend water to Lakewood Park and not also extend sewer? Hell, if you dig the ditch, put the pipe in it.
Chairman, Commissioner, so the water project is going to be approximately $48 million. That'll be paid for if the residents so choose at Lakewood Park, divided by the 3,600 to 4,000 residents. A sewer project would probably be pretty close to 1.5 times the double that cost in addition to the water. And it's not as simple as saying we're going to dig a hole, we can put both lines in. You're not allowed to put a water line next to a sewer line. It has to be so many feet apart, which would mean water lines don't affect the roads up there. The water lines will be going in between the road and the stormwater ditch there, and then obviously the only kind of cuts in the road would be if we can't bore under at intersections or driveways. A sewer system would probably more than likely be in the middle of the road, so then we'd be tearing up the road, so we'd have a much larger project. So even if we do them at the same time, it isn't saving any money.
Okay,
So
I understand that. By the same token, if you expand the urban service area for the southern half of this thing, a lot of that is vacant land at this time. So those concerns should not be of a magnitude. the county's going to need to get someday to where we do away with septic tanks. As dumb as that may sound, it's gonna come. To me, it's smarter to put all the pipes in one ditch or whatever length width you have to go if you're going to go into the urban service area to serve Mr. McCarty with water, serve him with sewer also, so that any development that goes out into that area will have that facility. Is that possible?
Chairman, Commissioner, it is possible if the landowner is willing to pay for it. Because the utility doesn't have the wherewithal to put the infrastructure on the ground without a mechanism to have it paid for.
They're gonna pay for it with impact fees anyway.
The fees that they pay are what's called a connection fee, which guarantees capacity for the service in the plant. So the fee that they're paying to the utility
Just as a
when they
hookup fee?
connect, the hookup fee that they're paying is basically that fee that gives them the guaranteed capacity for the water consumption that unit that paid for it is going to use. Same with the wastewater service. The infrastructure part becomes when the development happens. Usually what a developer will do is if they have a big plot of land and they're going to develop a 4,000 unit community, for example, inside that land, they're responsible to provide all the infrastructure inside that development as far as water lines, sewer lines, lift stations, things of that nature. Now, if there's a gap between where their line comes out into the county territory and ours, that's where the negotiation begins of how do we bridge that gap and make that connection. So that's how those kind of things work. In the existing neighborhoods already, our mechanism is the MSBU, as Corey did, indicate to do so. So that's pretty much the only way we can make this happen. We agree we'd love to put it everywhere, however, it comes at a cost.
I'm a simple individual, man. It just seems like if you're gonna dig a ditch, put everything you can in that ditch and get it over with.
We would like you with us
Benton.
when we talk to DEP, but they don't seem to agree with that.
I have to tacitly agree somewhat with Mr. Slay, that if we're gonna move this thing west, let's go west. Let's include Mr. McCarty. Let's include Florida Power and Lights fixtures out there. If we're gonna stub our toe, let's make it a big one. Are we deciding tonight on whether we do both expansions, north and south, or just the south?
Chair Taylor, Commissioner Lowndes, what was noticed and presented by staff is expanding the urban service boundary in South County and then establishing planning study areas in Central and North County east of Header Canal Road that could, based upon the evaluation and the outcome of that analysis, could offer recommendations to retain the urban service boundary in that area as is, expand it marginally, expand it out to Header Canal, or some of the results could be a proposal to expand it further west. But we want to ensure that there's the data and an analysis, an inventory of land considered within the existing urban service boundary, both the expansion area and then the study areas, to ensure that we maintain internal compliance with our comprehensive plan and Florida state statutes when we're considering that type of modification or comp plan.
When we expand to this new area, that includes part of Port St. Lucie?
That is correct.
What advantage does it give them for us to expand into their country?
I think it's more a logical extension.
There ain't
to
nothing
include
logical
those.
between St. Lucie County and Port St. Lucie, my man.
If we were to omit those areas, it would not have very defined and delineated boundaries. Since we have acknowledged there is existing urban growth, either completed, underway, or approved, we would include those areas acknowledging that the city's urban expansion.
So we're gonna expand into their area so that they can expand into our urban service area? Man, I can't tap dance that quick. Well, I don't understand what the advantage is to us to expand into their area.
Essentially, we're not proposing expansion of our service, our utility service or particulars.
Hell, they take it over anyway.
But there are certain services that St. Lucie County provides throughout individual municipalities. Libraries, transit, other community services related to healthcare, veteran services, homeless services. So we already are serving within their municipal boundaries.
Correct.
The expansion of the urban service boundary, including those growth areas in Port St. Lucie allow public investment in our strategic plan to continue investing in those public facilities, parks,
So if we
preserves,
left out this
recreational areas.
area, there'd be a void of those services from the county for them.
That is correct.
I got you,
yes.
thank you, sir. But it doesn't have to deal with utilities.
That is correct.
Okay. And we're talking about the south half yet and not the north half. We're gonna study it at a later date.
Yes, and come back with those findings. Our team has been in conversation with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, has developed a scope of services to be able to launch that study, hopefully later this year.
Not, just to remind yourself of this. Not everybody in this county wants to live 10 feet next to their neighbor when you start expanding this crap out there.
Question.
Do we have an estimated time frame of how long this study's gonna take and what it's gonna cost?
Chair Taylor, members of the commission, I think staff in our analysis is projected anywhere from 9 to 18 months, inclusive of public process and then hearings. The cost, we don't have definitive numbers, but I think our projections could be anywhere between $50,000 and $150,000, depending upon how detailed and micro level the studies end up progressing.
I'm looking at the population growth projection map. I guess I'm just kind of wondering, like, I mean, we've already got west of Johnston Road greater than 1,500 residents, all the way out to Sheehan. Like, what are we hoping to find out that this map doesn't already tell us?
Chair Taylor, and I'll shift to an exhibit from the Towns, Villages, and Countryside comprehensive plan, which seemingly is not accessible, but let me try to describe some of the unique characteristics of North County that should be considered. In the North County region, particularly most of the areas shown with growth that you've identified, they're within the Towns, Villages, and Countryside Overlay District, as well as the Future Land Use District that has a custom element of our comprehensive plan and a set of land development code regulations that guide that. Typically, in this area, outside of an urban service boundary, we've had one dwelling unit per acre in this region. What the TVC allows is the ability to transfer density rights, to have concentrated, compact areas of development while retaining some rural lands, agricultural lands, and countryside. Allows owners to shift and move some of those development rights. It also allows incentives to basically become a multiplier, taking one dwelling unit per acre and elevating it to 2, 3, 4, 5, or in the urban service boundary areas that do exist within the TVC, upwards of 10, 15, or more dwelling units per acre. If you recall the Indrio and I-95 project that has a planned town and village across 855 acres, only a portion of their project was within the urban service boundary, but what they did is they preserved a substantial amount of open space, lands for countryside type development, flowways for storm water, agriculturally productive areas to retain the landscape and natural features as well. And they concentrated that density to create new town centers, new communities, neighborhoods, in a compact, walkable form. And so it allowed the developer the ability to pursue more intensity and density without modifying and changing the urban service boundary, but ensuring that the owner or the developers on notice that extension of urban services outside of those boundaries are largely the responsibility of the developer. So North County, there's already, through the TVC, a program to provide for more intense and dense development, but we want to ensure that the study considers any impacts or modifications to the TVC, but then also how the county is looking at areas outside of it, west of it, engaging property owners and looking at that balance of employment, growth potential, light industrial uses, manufacturing, commercial to serve a new residential development that could be proposed west of I-95 along Indrio Road and surrounding areas. but map out some of the roadway infrastructure, work with George and his team to map out cost-effective ways to provide utilities and beyond. You know, the provision of parks and recreational areas that if we looked at the map today, the county is not providing in much of that area today. We have Lakewood Park Elementary School, but we don't have a high school established north of Westwood, or Westwood Academy. So those are the types of planning considerations we want to look at and launch in collaboration with the property owners in that area to see what the market has indicated to them interest, and make sure that we're on the same page. Certainly some of those property owners could say, well, we're fine and happy to continue our commercial agricultural activities. They may look and identify where, based upon the market and the industry, we want to pivot, and X and Y are considered growth potentials for those areas. And then the community, staff, and the planning study can hopefully identify the needs to maintain our level of service, to supply that laundry list of public facilities that we highlighted. And that can be as simple as fiber optics connections for high-speed internet and cable to ensure that technology and the evolution of employment, educational angles are considered as in these uncharted areas of growth.
Okay. Yeah, you can come up.
Thank you, Chair Taylor, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. It kind of scares me when staff says that they're going to study, you know, the northern areas. Although very talented, very bright, you know, the effects of TVC. TVC's been a disaster. That was a public process that took 18 months, involved the TCRP, at that time DEO, and there's no development on TVC. Commissioner Slack, I know that you say that you like it walkable, you like it new urbanist, new form. You know, you can't place make development. The market has got to dictate what people want, whether it's an acre or a half acre size lot, Commissioner Lowndes, or whether you move to an area and you want a smaller lot size and you don't want to maintain your property and you want the 5 feet. Give the developers the opportunity and the tools to create some of these wonderful communities, and let us share the cost through impact fees, through extension of the utilities, through the development of this northern county area. The whole reason that you know, Mr. Loomer hasn't moved forward on his TVC plan is because he can't develop it. You know, TVC is not something that we should be using as a model. We should be looking at Oak Ridge Ranches, some of the areas in the western annexation area of Port St. Lucie. You know, really the county has missed out because of TVC in some of those areas. So we would respectfully ask for the developer community to work with Mr. Landry, his utilities department, extend the utilities, have some successful developments, and I just wanted to say that for the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Slack.
When we don't plan development carefully, we end up with least common denominator development. And it is our responsibility, given the fact that we are educated in the realm of planning, to make sure that we look beyond what's the simplest, easiest, and most profitable, but instead look long range to make sure that we solve more problems than just how to make a buck off the land. We need to serve our whole community and make sure that we're not landlocked into a situation where we've got one gated community after the next, traffic snarls, people unhappy because they can't get from A to B within a reasonable amount of time, and a lack of equity within our community for people who don't have access financially to get around town or to get to their point of employment because they can't afford it.
Mr. Chair. A couple more items I failed to mention earlier. Corey pointed out the Bieber numbers in the TPO's long-range plan. those numbers that were used were last year's numbers, believe it or not. Bieber increased those estimates to from 525,000 to 566,000 for 2045, and it's 601,000 for 2050. So yeah, we do know that growth is coming, but one of the important parts of studying this, and not just say, oh, let's go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off and do it, is where can we apply density and either A, afford to build roadways to serve those areas, or B, actually have the room to do it. And that's what drove the TPO's 2045 transportation plan, which doesn't have everything funded for the 525,000 proposed population that was coming. So, you know, without properly studying this and determining that we've got to widen this road, that road, all of these things of when we apply those higher densities to these new areas, we are just going at it blindly. Where are we going to put schools? All of those things need to be properly analyzed. And that was my point on the discussion in Southwest Port St. Lucie. While they seem to be yahoos at times of just moving forward and growing, they have done it very systematically and tried not to get upside down where they created a development plan that cost more than it was bringing in. They carefully analyzed what the costs were going to be, and then what do we have to spend to get that, and how do we make it work? And part of it's through the right land uses in those areas, so that you don't just have you know, a 30,000 acre subdivision in western St. Lucie County.
Thank you. Mr. Bitter?
If you do the study areas, how long do the study areas take? And then after the study's done, how long until you could move this urban service boundary again? Like, what type of time frame would that, is that, like, instead of just doing it now, like, say you did the survey, all right, we got the plan, and then it's like a year, 2 years out?
Commissioner Benner has previously noted the projected duration for the study and the potential to implement any responsive policy is looked at between 9 and 18 months. Depending upon the outcome of that study, it may project that there's not needs to expand the urban service boundary, needs to expand the urban service boundary with a calculation and a particular rhyme or reason behind it, and then identify some of the preliminary essentials, as Mr. Sanders highlighted, you know, mapping out potential roadway networks, school facility sites, parks, libraries, and understanding the public cost associated with that. And again, as we talked at length at the last meeting about the calculation behind impact fees, you know, the assumptions made to ensure that we maintain the level of service for existing residents, but also support new development and having access to the same amenities.
So we're not looking at a 32-year wait before we revisit this again?
That is not the intent, and our Board of County Commissioners is looking for that to occur swiftly.
So are we delaying the development in the TVC by doing this study?
Chair Taylor, I would not suggest that we are delaying any development within the TVC unless, you know, there's market considerations that are testified to that including the entirety of the TVC within the urban service boundary. What it could do is it could hoist up density, capacity, and potential development rights throughout it, and different development schedules of options. But some of the same design standards, needs for roadways, needs for these public facilities would remain. The TVC, through the planning process, was very calculated in considering what's the absolute build-out potential from a dwelling unit or residence standpoint. What are the roadway needs, provisions for internal capture, walkability, and access to retail services and employment in closer proximity, and instead of a resident on Indrio traveling down to Becker Road for a job. So there's intricacies that were developed in the TVC. Part of the planning study suggested for this area would consider if there are needed modifications to the TVC parallel to any expansions to the urban service boundary, to be entertained in North County.
So if all the big industrial growth here, let's say Cheney, Amazon, and all them are going to the south part of the county, that would mean everybody from the north has to drive south anyway. I mean, that's the focus. All the growth, all the big growth coming in is to the south. So anybody wanting jobs, unless they're going to work at Maverick and Pursuit, is going down to Port St. Lucie to work.
And part of that assumes that there's substantial residential development on North County in advance of any commercial or job creation areas. The TVC does allow for specific pockets of industrial growth and development, but it doesn't rule out other areas for job creators adjacent to the interstate, adjacent to the interchange, and certain corridors where infrastructure exists. You know, when we talk about the market and you know, opportunities, one consideration, if we look at this TVC map, the boundaries of it, we referenced tonight, we have Interstate I-95, we have an interchange. There was investment in widening Indrio Road. There's talks about expanding water and wastewater in the area. The developer was engaged in a public-private partnership to bring utilities out to the interchange. But if we look at the expanse of this area, we know the condition and limitations of Johnson Road. And other than Kings Highway, which is in a phased expansion plan with DOT, there's not robust infrastructure in this area ready to serve substantial growth. There's not a utility package plant in the heart of it. There's not a significant amount of storm water ponds. There's not a park and preserve. There's, you know, other than, of course, in Lakewood Park, adjacent off of Emerson, we do have a regional park that was considered and factored in the TVC. But in this area, as we talked about with Mr. Sanders, there was a long-range plan and a game plan on how to extend roadways, how to invest in schools, how to invest in parks, libraries, where to orient and place job growth so we don't have the conflicts between intense industrial manufacturing and new residential. So there's a plan of how the synergy and how the public investment and private sector investment in this area could unfold. So again, staff, we've acknowledged the need to revisit the TVC, revisit North County, revisit the opportunity to work with the private sector and fulfilling certain growth needs. But certainly, if we look at a map of this area today, we don't have that plan. We don't have a lot of that infrastructure or identified areas for infrastructure in place. But we want to work with the community to develop that.
Mr. Chair, I've got to add, back in the early 90s, I remember Port St. Lucie, it was one of those woe is me's. All we are is a big subdivision. We don't have, Don Cooper, there's no place I could buy a suit in the city of Port St. Lucie. I can't buy a pair of shoes in the city of Port St. Lucie. And they purposely looked at that annexation areas. What kind of economic engine can we have for employment? What kind of economic engine can we have for retail and all of that? Instead of just expanding where you can build more homes. Because right now, the sweet spot on real estate is residential. That's where, you know, some of the highest and best use. And if we open up all of this western part of the county to expansion of the urban service area without understanding that delicate mix of what you need to support residential so that you're not driving from, you know, Indrio Road to Becker Road to get for a job because we didn't plant any jobs in the north part of the county, you will have nothing but good old gridlock.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you.
I do have a question on the TVC and that 1 mile stretch, you know, with the future expansion, the urban service being in the USB, with no water access along that stretch of Indrio from Lakewood Park Elementary to Emerson that I'm aware of. So what about that 1 mile stretch? Is that going to still remain a part of the TVC? that's two-lane?
Dr. Bridgers, this evening's presentation does not include any modifications to the TVC or boundary changes. During that study period, those types of considerations could be part of the analysis. As far as utilities and the intent to serve it, or any infrastructure changes as part of the roadway, I am not aware of any immediate goals outside of utilities.
So Chair, Commissioner, we do have a plan and process to complete that 1 mile gap there. Water runs up through Lakewood Park off Eden Road through Waterstone. However, there is a gap between Emerson and Kings on Embryo. And we are going to tie in those two lines that connect to the 16-inch and 12-inch line, because we are considering a water treatment facility right off of Taylor Dairy and Embryo Road. So we would have to tie in order to do that. So there is a project already on the books, and we're hoping to have it complete prior to 2026.
Awesome. And the reason I bring that up, Corey, is, you know, we started talking about the TVC in North County, and I was just curious, because I bug you about that all the time. You know, so thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lowndes?
Mr. Benton, if we go back for just a minute and talk about this southern section of it and the western boundary line of that, I don't know that we've had much total discretion on that. You had the right one up. There you go. Why can't we move that jog where your coat is out to where west of the Florida Power and Light facility? What does that do other than just expand our availability of putting utilities down the road?
Commissioner Lowndes, the considerations are the expectations of potential for growth and potential for public investment. If the urban service boundary of the county were to extend out here and would become very close to a lot of the established rural ranchettes and single-family homes. Geographically speaking, because of the environmental lands, wetlands, and the water farm and mining activities here, if an expansion were to be proposed this evening, staff would encourage consideration of limiting that north of or potentially inclusive of the air park, but in this target area. As previously highlighted, there's nothing precluding a private developer proposing extension of infrastructure or public facilities at their own cost to service a particular development scope. There are some considerations of land use modifications and intensification of land that we previously noted in this area for the prospects of industrial development, that, you know, for the sheer service of infrastructure and utilities, staff feels that the 1,500-foot extension could be of great value, but certainly if there's a shift to include this area, being conscious of potential intensification adjacent to those established residential areas, you know, striking and finding a balance of how far west that line is.
Does Port St. Lucie own McCarty Ranch?
They do.
Okay, so we aren't interfering with anything from them if you extend it out to Carlton Road, are we? Those people that are along that road may like to hook up to city water. I mean, yeah, county water. It'll become city water anyway, but what the hell?
Chair, Commissioner, the boundary line that's tentatively drawn out and it's been approved many years ago, long before me, has Rangeline Road as the city's farthest western way they can go with their utility. So west of Rangeline Road is St. Lucie County utility. So even if they annex it to make it city property, so to say, it's still county service territory when it comes to utilities. They don't get the utility with it.
We can't cross it as county? And the city of Port St. Lucie won't cross it going further north? Is that what you're telling me?
Correct. If we have a binding agreement on service territory boundaries, they can't cross without permission, and we can't cross theirs without permission. For utilities, they can annex property if they so choose, like, you know, and make it inside the city, but the utility stays with the county.
They can't cross it with their utility services?
Correct.
Okay.
So the county is required to provide the utilities west of Range Line Road regardless.
Chair, that is correct. So currently, just for all intents and purposes, Liberty Tire, that's on the west side of Range Line Road, is receiving service from the city of Port St. Lucie. However, we have an interlocal agreement with them that says that they can do that until we can provide that service, and then we give them said notice, and we take that service over.
Corey, what is the other area behind the Port St. Lucie Water Park, this L-shaped piece that's out here?
This here?
That piece there?
Probably native lands in their pre-existing state or agricultural citrus activities.
Are we going to create an island in there of unusable county land?
Staff wouldn't consider it an area of unusable land, but not an area targeted for public investment in infrastructure or intensification of uses, particularly because we're not, staff would be concerned about how roadway infrastructure would serve this without simply loading onto Range Line. But, you know, this commission can certainly offer amendments and alternatives.
Commissioner Benner?
All right, 2 questions. So out at McCarty Ranch, there's fire hydrants going out that long road to the park right now. So that's the city has permission to run that since there's no county lines there now?
And what road, down Glades Cutoff or down Range Line?
When I went out and checked out McCarty Ranch like a couple weeks ago, I was driving down the long road there off Range Line, and there's fire hydrants the whole way down that road. So there's water lines.
And that's possible. There could be an agreement. I'd have to look at that and can circle back to you there.
There's a water line all the way down Range Line Road.
Yeah,
From
but it
the
goes from,
extension of Crosstown Parkway all the way down to Wilson Grove.
yeah, when you go out McCarty Ranch, you gotta go back there like a mile or 2, and there's fire hydrants the whole way down that road. So somebody's running utility lines out there. I guess that means the city then?
Port St. Lucie does own that ranch, and so I imagine they had the capacity to serve their own
Right, there's
preserve.
probably an agreement between us somewhere that I don't have in front of me, but I
So
can.
then if we move the service boundary line, it's gonna, the land in the purple there, since that yellow line's covering it, they would be able to tie into the county because it would, part of their parcels are in the yellow dotted line, just not the whole parcel isn't in the dotted line, correct?
The entire parcel for McCarty Ranch is within the city limits.
I'm talking about the purple parcel, when you guys had that yellow dotted line.
Yes, you are correct.
So since
that
it covers both of them partially are encumbered by it, they would still be able to hook up the county lines on the north and east sections of their parcels, right?
if county lines exist in the area, there's nothing precluding a development from paying the cost for connection. However, the urban service boundary helps to delineate the goals of public investment dollars. The yellow line represented on screen identifies that 1,500-foot flex area where a property owner or a development proposal can claim that they're within the urban service boundary because of the proximity or adjacency to it.
So in other words, if you wanted to make that industrial at their expense, they could basically tie in right there off a range line and run their lines that way.
No, that's city.
In the long-range goal would be for the county to work from around Midway and Okeechobee Road, extend along Header Canal to serve prospective developments such as the Oak Ridge Ranch project, then eventually have the capacity to connect along Range Line Road, tie in with Martin County for looping of that infrastructure and network.
So would the landowners there be really gaining anything since it's kind of in that 1,500 foot already by including that all the way over? Or is this just kind of like it just looks cleaner on a map?
I think there could be a balance of the approach of identifying it on a map, but also when we look at requests for future land use map amendments asking to transition from agricultural land to an industrial district with more intensity. If you're in an urban service boundary, there are potential policies and goals and objectives in our comprehensive plan that could support that transition in a more robust manner. I think the 1,500-foot component, which touches a significant portion of those properties, provides almost a balance of the county is looking at utilities in this area and other infrastructure and services long range, but not necessarily east-west corridors of roadways or more robust investment.
The landowner then, you want it because it'd be easier to rezone in the future, basically, right?
Yes, may I speak?
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. So, I think we're getting a little bit caught up in urban service boundary. It shouldn't be as scary as what it is. Just because you identify imaginary line and say this is where the urban service boundary should be, just because you expand it and now there's land that falls within the urban service boundary, you're not identifying a land use designation, you're not identifying a zoning, you're not approving a project at any intensity with density or floor area ratio. We're talking about a service area. There are so many more bites at the apple that you get before you even get to design. We're talking land use, zoning, site plan approvals, go through the whole process that can take, 18 months to 2 years or more, depending on the scale of the project. Secondly, I know we're talking about the cost of infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, and et cetera, and that there needs to be this study and evaluation of how far we should move it because of the costs on the county. However, when you develop land, it's on the burden of the developer to put in that infrastructure. If a water line needs to be run, it's on the burden of the developer 9 times out of 10 to extend that water, put in the lift station, loop it through your project, okay? That's why there's, Mr. Landry was talking about how they upsized the line. They got the developer to pay for the installation, and then they upsized the line, right? So, just by looking at a map and trying to be fearful of where you move this line, that does not immediately hang the county on having to spend tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for infrastructure improvements. We're talking about designating an area. When you look at this map, does it make sense that the service area only be 15 feet off of Rangeline Road and be a L shape on our Citrus Grove? I don't think so. You should include the entire area up to the boundary of McCarty Ranch Preserve. So, I mean, what will we do? So let's move forward if we leave it like this with the 1,500 feet, right? In an L shape up on the top of our Citrus Grove. Am I only going to build industrial up along the road frontage like a plaza? That's ridiculous. Doesn't make any sense. Encompass the entire area. Service it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the board? Just to voice my opinion on this, I think Mr. McCarty brings up some good points. I think I'm on board. I think I understand the need for the study area in North Fort Pierce. So I think I'm okay with that happening and not further delaying this. But I would like to see the southern boundary of it at least fully encompass McCarty Ranch Preserve. I'm not sure where the best cutoff is west down Glades Cutoff.
Carlton Road.
Is that where that is? Carlton Road at the corner there. So that's where I'm at. Yeah. I think it kind of logically does not make sense to me to not encompass all of that southwestern portion.
Chair Taylor's members of the commission, just speaking and linking back to prior conversations, not necessarily in this particular area along Rangeline, but in areas along Carlton and Glades Cutoff and these more rural areas. We've had a lot of conversations with this body about sidewalk requirements, paved street requirements, and other expectations of new development that's inside the urban service boundary, and the potential implications for a potential subdivision or other development proposal out here that might not look and intend to have an urban form, but some of the applied regulations that are already on the books that would now be introduced to those property owners, potentially off of Carlton Road, and citing of those potentially conflicting uses adjacent to some of those established 20, 30, 40 acre estates. So again, staff's perspective is not to preclude or eliminate the ability to serve those areas with water and wastewater if the infrastructure is provided adjacent, and the potential ratepayers or the potential connectors are funding that, but the potential policy implications related to it, including areas off of Carlton Road and further west into the urban service boundary, that might be unintended consequences on existing owners.
Question. Isn't Rolling Oaks that Rolling Oaks place is already being established on 3,000 acres or whatever out west that's already outside the urban service boundary? Aren't they going to be putting in sidewalks, lights, and running their own water and sewer lines in there anyways?
Oak Ridge Ranch, their development program would.
So if somebody wanted to go up there off
presumably have-
Carlton Road and develop a subdivision with sidewalks, lights, and water and sewer lines, if it's not if they're doing it right now in that one project where we don't have urban service boundaries out there, what would stop somebody from doing it?
There's
like you
in
said,
theory-
we're not changing zoning, so
in theory, there's nothing precluding if a private developer was proposing a new community, 5 acres per dwelling unit, allowable under the current Ag 5 zoning district off Carlton. They had paved access to the project and was proposing 35 home sites, and wanted to, on their own investment, have sidewalks on both sides of the roads, street lights, you name it. There's nothing necessarily precluding that. Now, there's the consideration of compatibility and the prior discussion of light pollution and impacts to adjacent agricultural lands and what it may be the overall environment. But if the private sector is providing those amenities above and beyond, typically the local government is not going to infringe upon that. But what I was referencing is certain binding requirements in our code as it's differentiated between the urban service boundary and not. And we've grappled with that as we talked about paved streets, sidewalks, alternatives to providing sidewalks in certain subdivisions that could have unintended consequences on a prospective developer who wants to simply build an 8-lot subdivision out west. And so as our team looks to eventually revisit some alternative design standards for agricultural subdivisions, if we use the urban service boundary as that delineation to be able to reduce some standards if there's density concessions or other restrictive covenants, it could impact that ability. If the urban service boundary is so far west, we can't use that as a delineation line for that regulation.
if you're in the urban service boundary, in other words, you can't get approval for like a mulch sidewalk or something like that. It has to be like a fully paved. There's no room for negotiation on that.
Under the
Inside
current
boundary.
guidelines, yes. Unless it's a payment in lieu of.
That makes
Then
sense.
there's the cost burden for that design fee.
So I'm kind of cool then. I mean, my opinion is I'm cool with the current line as long as we include the purple square, a rectangle. This doesn't make sense to me.
Mr. Chair, if you look at the parcel size along Carlton Road, the average parcel size is about 20 acres. Oak Ridge Ranch, 3,400 acres, one owner. The McCarty Ranch there, one owner, what do you own, 600 acres, 1,200 acres? So they're all very large parcel size along Rangeline Road. So it would make sense to include that mile west of Rangeline Road. So as Mr. McCarty said, that you get the entire development so you can properly plan it and not just have a strip along the road frontage as a development.
Yeah, I think what I'm envisioning is where the dotted line is now at Header Canal Road, going further south to Glades Cutoff and then west to Carlton and then south, is kind of what I'm thinking. Instead of moving the entire western portion to Carlton Road, right? What do you guys
Yeah,
think?
yeah, you can like bring it down, go out and come down to FP&L, you know, make it clean.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Chairman, is a motion in order?
I would love one.
I hereby consider the testimony, after considering God almighty, after considering the testimony presented during the public hearing, including comments, the staff's comments, I hereby move that the Planning and Zoning Commission, acting as a local planning agency for St. Lucie County, recommend that the St. Lucie County Board of County Commissioners approve transmittal of the proposed comprehensive plan map, text amendment including the urban service boundary expansion, planning study area, and corresponding objective and policy updates to the State Land Planning Agency with considerations from this board that the western portion of the southern expansion be moved to Carlton Road.
Can you be a little more specific on that boundary to Carlton Road in your motion?
Carlton Road meanders, but if they take Carlton Road straight through, it'll come out to just west of or just west of.
Yeah, but look at the north part.
So are you saying Midway Road to Carlton Road?
If
and
you
then
take
south?
Carlton Road north, it comes out almost to Sneed Road.
Okay, are we clear of what he's suggesting here?
That would move that western boundary, instead of being Header Canal, it would move the western boundary of the southern portion to Carlton Road, and out Okeechobee
So
Road.
just the southern portion south of Glades Cutoff?
Yes,
Right, okay, so you're not saying Midway to Carlton Road and south, you're not saying that?
correct.
Right, okay. I'm on board with it. Do we have a second?
I need to clear it. Can we draw that out so we know exactly what he's talking
Bo, what I'm talking about is that the western boundary would be Carlton Road to Okeechobee Road,
about?
and then Okeechobee Road to Header Canal from the way it's being planned at this time.
Gotcha.
To include
And
the
then that's
FPNL property?
incorporating the piece on range line.
Pardon?
That's incorporating the between range line and McCarty Ranch also.
Correct.
Right.
See on here. Is this what you mean? Here, or are you talking about going
No,
out
I'm
here?
talking about coming out Okeechobee Road
All
this
the
way
Gotcha.
to here and coming straight down.
Alright. Cutting that part of Carlton Road.
This would be out of it. Coming straight down from Sneed Road to Carlton Road
Okay.
west, but not
Yeah.
Sneed Road up to here. Sneed Road to Header Canal would be under the next
Yeah. Gotcha.
discussion.
Got that, Corey? So if you take Sneed Road at Okeechobee, go straight down to
Go
Carlton
straight
Road?
down, you'll line up with
Keep
Carlton
going.
Road, go
That's what
down,
he's
there you go.
proposing.
And out Okeechobee Road to where your
Okay.
dotted line is. Did it go up, right there. There you go. Now, you've got a square block instead of a checkerboard thing like we've been dealing with for the last 35 years in the rest of the urban service area.
Okay,
That's my motion.
and the study portions to the north as recommended by
As it's
staff?
planned.
Okay. Everyone understands the motion, I am still looking for a second.
Yeah, a second.
Okay,
Yep.
second, Commissioner Slay. Okay, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bridgers?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Slack?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Benner?
No.
Mr. Slay?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lowndes?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Lowe?
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Taylor?
Yes, ma'am. Was that,
Mr. Chairman, the motion carries 5-2.
thank you.
Do what?
Motion carries 5-2. Okay, that concludes this evening's agenda. If there's any announcements, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.